All right, so here we go. Here is our Google Drive. What is Google Drive? If you're brand new to this, you've seen it a couple times, or maybe you've never seen it at all. Google Drive, one of the ways that I hear people explain is kind of like your desktop. Yeah, like on your computer or your laptop. Your desktop is kind of a place where you store things. You might have some folders, you put some files in it and stuff like that. That's kind of like what Drive is. The first thing you'll notice is that I am in a browser. And if you look down here, you'll see that I'm in a Google Chrome browser. So Drive is accessed through the internet. It's on our computer, we see it, but it's really, we're interacting at near the speed of light with our different mouse clicks and strokes of the keyboard with the Google server farms. And that's where all this information is stored. So if you've been around computers for a few years, you remember the olden days when you're working on a document, you're writing something, you spent 2 hours on it, and oh my gosh, you can't wait for your colleagues or family to see it, whatever that document is, and then the power goes out and you lose everything. Well, with all things Google, Google Docs, Sheets, or Drive in this case, you won't lose anything, except for maybe the last second or two of something, because you're interacting through this browser, through your computer up into the cloud. Everything's being recorded in those Google server farms. And there's some really neat things that are available to us, like going back and seeing document history or different versions of things, or finding out what activities happen with a certain folder or file that you've shared with someone. You can find out when someone has changed something, added things, and we're going to see examples of all of that today. But that's kind of cool. So Drive is something that happens up in the cloud, and there's benefits for that. All right, so we called it a home page or a desktop or something like that. It's just a place for us to store all things Google. So let's take a look here. I can move this thing out of the way. Got my little zoom windows here that you can't see that I got to move out of the way once in a while. All right, so we're just going to kind of look at just the general way that this is set up. And again, if you're new to this, or even if you've done this a couple dozen times or maybe 100 times, just know that Google Drive and all things Google are confusing or easily confused, the different things that you can do for a lot of different reasons. And we're going to talk about that real quick. So earlier I had mentioned about the Google server farms. Well, Drive and all of the different apps. What kind of apps? I'll just click on this real fast. So we've got docs and sheets and slides and forms and many more apps that are out there. All of those reside up in the cloud or the Google server farms. And so because they reside up in the cloud, anytime Google, the smart men and women engineers that are making these apps better, anytime they want to add a feature or sometimes take a feature away, they can do that. And you won't necessarily know. Sometimes there's some new things. In fact, look at this big blue banner here. We're going to take a look at this for a second. I'm not going to click and make it go away, but we're going to talk specifically about this a little bit later. But look, it's right here in the middle, so you can't miss it. It says, now you can block people in Drive. Okay, what does that mean? To prevent people outside your organization from sharing unwanted files with you. Right-click on the file they've shared with you and choose Block. And then it says learn more. And if I want to get rid of this, I can hit that and get rid of it. I'm not going to do that just yet. But I saw this for the first time since it wasn't there before I left for summer. So I saw it in the last couple of days, opening up my Drive and this banner. And I was trying to figure out what the heck that was. So I started experimenting with it. Well, the first thing to pay attention to is it says people outside your organization. What does that mean? Well, again, Drive resides up in the cloud. And the Google server farms where they can add things to Drive, take things away. This button used to be red a couple of years ago. Now it's white. Not sure why they changed that, but they did. Maybe it's because there were some new features inside, so they wanted to get your attention. But I want you to look over here where it says Google account. And there's a little picture of me. That's me. And it says Google account, and it says t.jasperson@sandy.net. That is my sandy.net email address. And every one of us in the district get an email address that's sandy.net, which means we're part of the sandy.net domain. Or in this case, we are part of the Google sandy.net domain. What does that mean? Well, Just like we have the Google server farms up there in the cloud somewhere that we're interacting with. Well, it's kind of all run through, and not to guess, but I think we have some servers within our district for the sandy.net Google domain that where we get to store some things somewhere within our district or whatever. But what that means is really is we have an administrator, and that administrator has some control over what we get to see and use for all things Google. All right. Many of us have Google accounts already outside of the sandy.net Google domain. What does that mean? Well, I've had a Yahoo email account for many, many years. And so when I signed up for my Drive account, I'm going to click on this one. This was associated with my, not my sandy.net, but my Yahoo account. I'm going to hover over this real quick, and it says t.jeffpercent@yahoo.com. That's my Yahoo account. So a long time ago, before I ever started teaching these classes, I went ahead and created my Google account and associated it with the email that I used all the time. So when I get notifications of messages, I would get it on that email thing that I use. And that is my private account. So I want you to notice something. I've added a picture up here, and you can't really see it except for, I'll just tell you, that's my wife and I, some vacation photo from years ago. And so I know when I see a picture of my wife and I, that this Google Drive account is my private one, or stated differently, is outside of the sandy.net Google domain. Now I'm going to go back to my sandy.net one. You'll see there's a different picture. It's just me. And so that's the way that I keep tabs on whether I'm in my personal one or sandy.net account. And it's important that I remember that. And I'm mentioning this to you all because we're going to be bouncing back and forth at times between my personal Google account with part of my Yahoo and then my sandy.net. And why is that? Because when we're demonstrating sharing and different things like that, different things will happen in our sandy.net Google domain. But before we go any further, I just want to mention again that there is a sandy.net Google domain administrator in our district, and that individual is in charge of what we get to do with our drive. So just as I said up in the cloud, the smart men and women engineers at Google can change, like say, the color of this button or something like that if they choose to, or add new features like this priority showed up, I don't know, 6 or 10 months ago or something like that, wasn't there before. They can change the way things work. So can our sandy.net Google administrator. All right. So that's just something to keep in mind, because if you are using a personal Google account, in this case, Google Drive, and you're used to doing X, Y, and Z, and suddenly you are in your sandy.net drive and it's not working the same, well, that's why you've been restricted. One of the best examples is if I go here to my, again, this is my personal one because you see a picture of my wife and I. And this, we call this the Google Apps waffle, or just the Google Apps little grid or something. And if I click on that, we get to see all kinds of different Google apps. And I can jump, well, I'm already in Drive, but I can go to Calendar, go to Search. If I look down, there's Docs and Sheets and, you know, YouTube and all that. And look at this, there's Gmail. I can go to a Gmail account and I can have a Gmail account. Well, guess what? I'm going to leave my personal one now and go back to my sandy.net one. And if I try to look in there, and I won't find the Gmail. Why is that? Well, many of you may know that we are heavily invested in the district with all things Microsoft because of our servers and otherwise, and using Word and other things or whatever. The district wants us to use Outlook. And if we're working from home, we're using the Outlook client on our through our browser, because that's what this is, my Chrome browser here. And so that's the one they want us to use. So you're not going to see Gmail up here because they want to have some control over it. I don't know exactly the reason, but that's what they've decided to do, which is a shame because there's some great things that between your Gmail and your Drive that you can do that we can't do within the district. But one thing I wanted you to note is that you can scroll through here and find all kinds of different things that are available to you from Google and all that. And if something is important to you, like say Google Forms, you're doing that all the time. left click and drag it. Yeah, you can move it up there. Or if you want, you can put it back because you changed your mind. You can move these things around, and whatever is most important to you, you can put them up here at the top so you can get to them quickly when you click on this little grid thing. And that's pretty cool if they allow us to do that. But again, you're not going to see Gmail there. Because of the sandy.net Google domain, they decided that we're not going to use that. So keep that in mind. All right. So let's look at a few more things that are here. All right, so we've got this main area here. It's kind of sticking out in our face. So let's talk about it first. And so we see something that says suggested. This used to be called something else before. It might even have been called recent. But when they start making changes to things, they start changing the names of that. And we see that there's a recent down here. So suggested says I opened this today. Sure enough, there's my calendar that I did in Google Docs. Something I shared today when I was practicing sharing earlier today. And of course, here's the Google Sites websites that I created for you all to have that information. And so it's suggesting a couple things. It's just right up here. And we see these, we call them tiles or thumbnails, and kind of see what it looks like. And so it's easier for you if you're trying to see what these files are instead of just remembering the names. You say, oh yeah, clearly those are my, I don't have to read this down here. I could just look at that and know those are my websites. So it's kind of handy to have that. And then down below the suggested area, we see a section called folders. All right. And you can see that I have quite a few folders here. And if you took the time to count 4 by 5, you'd see 4 by 5 is 20 minus 1. So I have 19 folders here. Some of them are different colors, and some of them stand out better than others. Some of them have this little symbol here of a little person on there, kind of like these two. That means that they're shared, and we'll get into that a little bit later. And then this one right here has a little button on it, and this is actually a shortcut. Again, this is something new that came about, I don't know, what was it, 6 months or 12 months ago? Time goes by so fast. And so we'll talk about a shortcut to a folder. Well, where does this folder really reside? Somewhere inside all of these, and we'll take a look at a couple of them in just a moment. But first, we're just talking about the general layout of our drive. And so beneath the folders, we then have files. And then as you can see, I have this set up in what's called grid view, where we can see the thumbnails, or sometimes you call them just little pictures or whatever that you can see. So I know this is a Google slide because I remember when we made it for that class and it had horses on it. But also I see down here, there's a little icon, and that happens to be the little icon for a Google slide. So in this grid view, and yes, we can change it. This is why it's so easy to get confused in Drive. In this grid view, we could know what each one of these things are we're looking at by virtue of the picture, the image that we see, but also by these little icons in the corner. So with a little bit of practice, we'll learn that this particular green one is Google Sheets, and this one is Google Docs. This is Slides, Sheets. This is what happens to be Forms. If you go down a little bit, you'll see some other ones. Ah, there's a shortcut to something. What does that mean? Well, that means that unlike these files here that reside in my drive, because that's just where I happen to put them or let them be, this one actually resides in one of those mini folders up here. And in fact, I'll even show you a little bit later where it is, but I made a shortcut to it. And that's what that little icon is indicating. And yes, you can see that it's a Google Doc. But if I scroll down a little bit more, there's other icons like this one, which basically saying it's an image. You can see that's a picture from one of my vacation photos. That's what I looked like before the pandemic. I'll tell you, my beard's about 5 inches longer now. And too bad we don't have the camera for you to see all that. But we go down a little bit further, we see some other ones, PDFs. All right. So all of the files that I have in my drive, and I know I'm in my drive because here's my little breadcrumb trail, sometimes called a little navigation trail that goes right here. I'm in my drive, and these are all the files that are in there. And so again, we go back, here's the suggested things that we've worked on, something Google's serving up automatically saying, hey, you worked on these recently, or you look at these a lot, or are these interesting to you, or you want to go to one of those? And so, yeah, if it's something I've done just recently and there it is, boom, that's kind of fast. But again, we have a recent over here. We'll look at that in a little bit. It's a little bit more clever on how it serves stuff up. So maybe we don't need suggested. Are you saying, Mr. J, that you can get rid of the suggested thing here? Absolutely. The thing with Drive is the wonderful men and women engineers have made so many possible things you can do, um, so many features, so many things you can do to make it easier for you to have it look the way that you want it, like these colors and stuff. Because there's so many variables, it can get really confusing. So again, we're just going over the basics right now of what this looks like in this particular form, because yes, you can change the way all of this looks. And we're going to show you some of those in a minute. So again, we have suggested. Of course, we have the banner up top. Whenever there's something majorly new, and I'll just go back to October 15th of 2020, or was it 2019? But I remember it was in the middle of October. There was a banner here that said, hey, all that stuff you're storing in your trash can, well, after 30 days, it's going to disappear and you'll never see it again unless you restore it and put it in one of these folders. It's like, wait, whoa, what? Because a lot of us, like me, teaching these classes and having gazillions of different documents and things, I would throw them away all the time, but knowing that they'd be stored in the trash. And pretty soon I had a couple thousand, if not 10,000 different things that I threw away. And then I could always go back and search through the trash and find them and restore them if I wanted. Well, Google got tired of storing all of our stuff. So they said, after 30 days, they're gone. And that, again, when that was a new thing, a banner showed up here for a couple of months, letting us know that that was going to happen. All right, so again, folders, there they are. Files, there they are. And they keep going on down. If you look over here at my little scroll bar, I scroll down for a while. Oh, look, we got to the bottom. Well, then it loaded some more. And I keep scrolling. Oh, I got to the bottom. And then it loads some more. And Mr. J, why on earth do you have 500 different things just floating around in your drive? That's got to be a terrible way to organize things. Well, I will tell you that since they got rid of unlimited trash storage, this has kind of become my trash. Why? Because all of the important stuff that I have is organized into these folders here. And so I can have as many files inside any folder I want. I can have as many folders inside folders as I want with files inside those, and so on and so forth. So I can store them all that way. And before we go any further, I'll just say this. Maybe you have a garage that you've organized before, or maybe need to organize, or maybe you've got a utility room or something where you keep all of your arts and craft supplies, or whatever your hobbies are that you like to do. Wow, what a difference when those places are organized, where maybe you have bins or those things they sell at Costco. What do you call those? Giant tubbies, or what we call them, you know, the ones with the yellow lid. And you can store all your stuff in there and you can label it. And so you go into your hobby room or your garage, and dadgummit, you guys are going to go skiing and all your stuff's right there. It's organized and it's ready to find and it's easy to do. It's great to have things organized because you can find them. You absolutely want to do that with your drive. And again, the wonderful people at Google said, we're going to give you 500 different options on how you can store stuff and make it look and how to find things and retrieve them. So it gets very confusing at the beginning. So again, we're backing up here, going just to the basics. And so there it is. So let's take a look real quick at our folders and see how they're organized. Well, this one's a shortcut, but you'll notice it says ... and then April 2021. Well, just for fun, we're going to go find that in just a second. I'm going to tell you why I have a shortcut for that. But before we do, this one says 2020, 2020, 2021. And then we've got some C's and E's and G's and all the way down here to our Z's. And so you might recognize that we have this ordered in alphanumeric order. It's kind of like alphabetical order, except for the numbers come first. And when you have something organized in alphanumeric order, it turns out that punctuation marks come before the numbers. And then the numbers come before the letters. And then the letters, of course, are from lowest to highest, or in this case, A to Z. And so that's why this is organized in that way. That's kind of cool. And yes, you can change that. And sometimes it'll even change on its own. If you're not paying attention, something gets clicked or weird things happen. And I will say that real quick. Think about every movement of the mouse, every click on something when I go to it. In fact, I'm just going to click on this, double click on it. All right. So now I'm in my April 2021 plus folder. What is that? Well, I have every class that I teach. I keep a spreadsheet with the email addresses and names of all the people. Why? So if I want to send them a message or something in the future, like, hey, all our new classes are, just been loaded in our calendar, like I might do this on Friday. I have a list of all of the students from every class, and you can see there's the different dates and the names of them, whatever. And that's where I store it. And now if we look at this breadcrumb trail here, you can see that it's this April 2021 is inside the 2021 folder. And that's inside, what the heck is this? Well, let's just click on it and see what happens. Okay, so in my drive, I have a folder, it happens to be green, called Zoom Recordings. And in Zoom Recordings, I got another folder called Email Addresses. And so inside Email Addresses, I have another folder called 2021. And inside that one, I have a folder called April 2021, and this is the contents. Can I add more folders here and more files? You bet. You can change this up in any way you want. If I want to, can I get rid of this folder and just put all the contents of this somewhere over here in one of these? Yeah, you can do all of that. You can move things around and organize things in a myriad of different ways. Let's go back to Drive real quick. So there's our folders. So I put that shortcut there because when I start to have my classes again, that'll start here in a week or so, and I want to be able to keep a spreadsheet with all those email addresses on it, something that's important to me so I can send out messages to people and keep track of who's in my classes, when, and all that. I want to be able to access that quickly, so I made a shortcut so that I don't have to do this. Okay, where did I keep all those email addresses? Let's see, I think it was in Zoom Recordings. Yeah, that's right. So in my drive, I just double clicked on it. It's called drilling down into Zoom Recording. So now I'm there. And oh, look, the banner's still there reminding me all this stuff. Yeah, we'll deal with that later. So look, I have folders. It's still folders come first, and then files are next. So I got a bunch of files in here. Oh, what are these? Looks like here's another icon. That happens to mean MP4 or movies. Yeah, those are my Zoom recording of different classes that I taught that I have just stored in here. And by the way, you get unlimited storage with the sandy.net Google domain. I'll share a little bit more about that in a second. But once I clicked on Zoom Recordings and drilled down, I saw all of these folders and files. And now if I look and it says email addresses and I double click on that, now inside my drive, inside my Zoom Recordings, I just drilled down into email addresses, and I've got all of the classes that I did in 2020 and all the way to 2021. And then because I made a master email list of every person in every one of those classes up until April of 2021, I separated the ones up until April. So there's all the ones up until April, and then there's all the ones after. And so all of these have been added to my master list and these have not. And so that's just a little way that I've organized it. So you'll see that to get to the April 2021, I had to go through all of these folders. And again, it doesn't show all of them, but they're right here. I went into my Zoom recordings, then into email addresses, then 2021, and then I clicked on 2021 plus, and that gave me this. Now, I could, because I made this shortcut, just double click on this, and it takes me to the same spot. And you'll see the exact same breadcrumb trail or navigation trail that's there. And so what's cool about this is if I want to go back one folder, remember April 2021 plus is inside 2020. There it is. And so now I'm in the 2021. And where's that folder? It's inside email addresses. All right. So in the email addresses, I had these different dates, and that was the one where we just were. So we could use this to navigate. That's why they call it a navigation bar or breadcrumb trail, and kind of see what's going on there. So that's pretty slick. So let's go ahead and go back to here. And all right, before we go any further with that, let's just acknowledge one thing real quick. So again, this is alphanumeric order, and we can see that it starts with the lowest and goes up to the highest. Well, over here, if I just hover over this, it says reverse sort direction. Yeah, if I click that, then all my Z's will be up here, and this one, because again, it's alphanumeric, so the little dots show up first. It will end up being at the other end because we reversed the sort order. All right, I want to go ahead and do that. Just know that when you're clicking on things and you're changing the way things look, again, we are interacting not with the computer's hard drive, on my computer right here in my home office, but actually with the server farm. And sometimes clicks and things don't get quite recorded for whatever reason. A packet of info gets lost or whatever data gets lost. And so weird things happen. So I've reversed the order right now, and I don't like it in backwards order. So I'm going to go ahead and reverse it again and put it back the way it was. And so what'll happen is I might be clicking around here, going into one of these other ones, or maybe down here looking at some file or something, and I come back and now the Z's are on top again. What the heck just happened? Well, something happened and the Google server says, oh, we lost a data packet. Well, we'll just restore it back to the way it was before we lost that packet. And so that might have been when the Z's are up here. So just know weird things like that can happen. But again, you can always change it by simply doing this. What I find is if I reset the page, or what's another word? If I, what's the word? Update it or refresh it. That's the word. It started with an R. If I want to refresh the page, I can do that a couple of ways. I can hit this little reload or refresh button, or I can just, since I'm right in Drive, I'm not deep into files, I could just click Drive and it will refresh it. And now that it's been refreshed, chances are it's not going to accidentally flip around. So you'll find me doing that a lot, kind of refreshing the page once I've set something. But you'll notice that, so this is the sort order by name. And sure enough, there it is. We have alphanumeric order, the names, we see the Z's are at the end. And again, the little punctuation marks happen before the numbers, and then the numbers go from the smallest to largest. Remember that. And I mention that because it can be handy. Because I want to, when I start teaching 2 classes a day, by the end of the week, I might have 10 list of people, email addresses and stuff like that. And I'm going to this file, the April 2021 plus file, a lot. And so it's nice to have it as a shortcut for sure, but I want it to be in the prime position, that first spot. So the way that I do that is I just put the dots up there. And if I wanted a file that was going to go right in front of that, maybe I'd put 4 dots. And so that it would be in front of the A in this case for April. All right, we're moving along. Well, hey, Mr. J, you said this was really confusing, and so far everything you said makes perfect sense, and I don't see how it's that confusing. Well, just know that there's a lot of variables involved and we can change that. And so, for example, and I failed to show this to you, so let's do it again. Reverse sort order. Notice down here that my first files start with punctuation marks. There's a dot in front of that one. And then there's a 2 here and a 2 there, and it goes to 3. So this is clearly an alphanumeric order. And later when I'm trying to find some things that I'm going to share with you, I know what they're called. And so I'll look at the C section or the B section or, you know, the F section or whatever, and so on and so forth. So this is an alphanumeric order, all of these files. And so when I go up here and I reverse sort order, it's also reversing the sort order for files down here. So again, the Z's on top, April's down here because it has the dots in front of it. And so again, here's all the Z's, and there's 4 Z's. Why do you name those that way, Mr. J? Well, because I'm always testing things and practicing with stuff, and I want to be able to find it quickly, I will put Z's in front of it. And it also tells me later if I'm looking for something that those aren't important. Those are just practice things. And so if I want, I can toss them out or do whatever I want. And so if I scroll down here, it's going to take me a while to get through my 500 or plus files, whatever, to see, to get all the way back to that, to get to the one that had the question marks on it. Of course, I could always do this, reverse the order. Now the one with the question marks is back up front. Again, I'm going to hit Drive just to refresh it, just to make sure it sticks. And there it is. Okay, not so confusing. Well, let's take a look at some of these icons here. And by the way, we're going to try to get to just about everything that's in here. So this next one we're going to look at is this one here. If I hover over it, it says List View. All right. I mentioned before, we're in grid view. That's what gives us these little thumbnails, these little tiles with the pictures on it. And so we see our sort order and all that. It's all, we've established the order and how it's done already, but we can switch it to list view. So let's take a look. First thing you'll notice is the suggested thing is still in those little tiles, like we saw before, kind of like the grid view, right? But now if we look, here's our folder section. And how do I know these folders? Well, for one, they look like folders. And of course, I'm familiar with these, and I remember the April shortcut to that folder where I store all of my email addresses for classes. And then I go down a little bit further. Here's all of my Z's. So these are the last of the folders. And then just like before, when we saw this in the grid view, we saw that in the bottom left-hand corner, we could tell that it was a Google Sheet or a Google Doc or a Google Slide. So in the list view, they've done the same thing. But they got some other information that's here that's kind of cool. It shows us who the owner is. And when it says me, that means I'm the owner. In this case, my sandy.net self. All right. It's got some other information. Last modified. Well, that's pretty cool. So when I last modified these different folders and things and file size, well, all of these files right here are, in this case, folders with files. They don't take up any space. Let's go down a little bit. Remember all of these here? We've got, this is a sheets, a docs, a slides. It's not taking up any space, so there's no size to the file. Why is that? Because it's not counting against our storage in our storage, basically in our drive, where we're keeping all these folders and files. But if we go down a little bit, we get to this one here. Well, that's just a photograph. And so that happens to be 164 kilobytes. And yes, that's 164 kilobytes. Remember, there's 1,000 kilobytes in a megabyte. There's 1,000 megabytes in a gigabyte. And there's 1,000 gigabytes in a, oh dear, I've lost it. Gig. Oh, come on. It's bounced out of my head. I apologize. Terabyte. There it is. It was in there somewhere. And so these two are taking up, and this one down here, which happens to be a PDF, these are not Google products. And so if I went down further, I'd find a Word document or a Microsoft Excel document. And that's part of what's taking up our storage. And you can see that in my Google Drive, I've got 22.51 gigabytes stored. And again, none of the Google stuff counts against that storage, but everything that's non-Google, whether it's Microsoft, Adobe, PDF, pictures, things like that, MP4, movie things, that all counts as storage. And if we want to see what those things are, we could click on it. And we have a list view here. And if I scroll down a little bit, you'll notice that it's in order from the biggest storage amount down to smaller. So there's a 1 point something gigabyte, just less than a full gigabyte is 983 megabytes. And so on, we go down and down. And of course, those are all the movies, the MP4s that I took of our Zoom classes. Here's a bunch of Word documents. And what's cool is you'll notice that the Word documents, because it's a it deals with documents, it's blue. And so it was good of Google, who came later, to make their Google Docs also blue. Looks a little different, the icon, but then with our Excel, we know is green. And if we scroll down, we'll see some of those with the knee on it here. Got to go down a ways. For some reason, the Word ones take up a lot more. There's some PDFs. Oh, come on, Mr. J, that's getting ridiculous. There's some PowerPoints. Anyway, you'll have to trust me then, because I'm not going to spend that much time doing that. But the Microsoft Excels are green, and then of course the Google Sheets are also green. So at least that's helpful when we're organizing and looking through things. But what about this storage? Well, this is really cool. We get to store as much as we want in our sandy.net Google domain. Thank you, Google Administrator. Thank you, San Diego Unified, because now I can store all of these MP4s that I've made, and I don't have to worry about paying for more storage. What am I talking about? Real quick, if I go back to my personal Google Drive, and remember, it's a picture of my wife and I, so that's associated with my Yahoo account. And you'll notice it says 2.4 gigs of 15 gigabytes used. Yeah, Google, when you set up a personal one outside the sandy.net domain, they give you free 15 gigabytes of storage. But when you get past that, you have to buy more. And yes, you do have to buy more, and it costs you every single month. So if you're storing all kinds of videos and things like that, you could be paying 10 bucks a month, or $100 a year or whatever. That's money, and that costs money. And again, we only have to worry about this in our personal ones. Why? Because let me get out of here. Because San Diego Unified has given us unlimited storage. So that's awesome. So thank you, San Diego Unified, for doing that. So again, there's our storage where we put all that stuff. Let's go back to our drive where we were. And we were talking about the fact that we have this in list view right now. And so it's the folders first in the same order. Can I change it? You bet. I can always go and change the order. Here it is. It's over on this side now. So I can reverse the order if I want. And we're going to get to this one here is by name. We're going to keep it on that for the time being. But this is the way that I like, not to keep it in the list form like that. Yeah, it's got some extra information, but I like to have it in the tiles or the grid view. And to get it back, all I got to do is just go up here and click grid view, the same place where I made it into list view a few minutes ago. And so now I can kind of see things that are here. So again, we don't get that extra information, but it's very easy to get that information. And we'll show you how to do that in just a second. But before I do, just know that there are more ways that you can set up how things look. And again, all these variables make it kind of crazy when we're learning this for the first time, or if we accidentally switch the way it's presenting or the way we see it in Drive, it gets a little confusing. We saw this a couple times, no big deal, reverse sort order, we get that. That's a variable you always have, but right now it's in the name. Well, let's click on it and see what else we have. Okay, so we know it's in alphanumeric order by name because we see the check mark there. But we can also take all of these and do it by last modified. Okay, that's interesting. So just for fun, I'm gonna do one of those in a second. But last modify, we have more options. Last modified by me. Well, why would we have two of those? What the heck does that mean? Well, remember, some folders and some files we've shared with people or they shared with us. And so because there's more than one person using a folder or a file, if you want to find something that was last modified, you need to be specific, whether it was you that modified it or someone else. So they're giving you that option. That's pretty cool. And then last opened by me. So that's interesting. So you don't want one that you've shared of someone else, and say you've shared this with your whole department, 100 people, and people are opening that all the time. If it's last opened by anyone, then it would always be up here at the prime position or whatever. Well, let's take a look at this real quick. So I'm just going to say last modified by me. I'm going to select it and see what happens. So we're no longer in alphanumeric order. All right. So apparently this classroom one was the last modified by me folder, followed by this one, all the way down to April 2021. Well, guess what? I think that's backwards. And I don't go into all these files. A lot have been gone for the summer, as I mentioned, but I think this is the last one that has been modified by me, because I think this is the one that I've most recently done. So we see what happened here. It actually reversed the order or went to a different order than what we were expecting. So this can be kind of confusing right off the bat. And so if we look down at the files, the same thing. Google Sites, how to, whatever. These are different things that I have in my drive, different files, different kinds, PDFs, slides, docs, and all of that. And so let's take a look at the order. I have so many files, I have no idea, but I'm going to reverse the order. And again, it's last modified by me. So I think that's the correct order. I think that this is the one that's been last modified by me, not this one down here. But again, so it's about me being familiar with all of this. So you're watching me who deals with this and teaches this class, getting confused as to which one I've modified most recently. These extra ones, I like to keep it on name just because it makes it so much easier, less variables to deal with. And then again, on files, apparently this one right here is one that I did most recently, and that makes more sense. I think that we have the proper order. So again, reverse sort order, we can change that back and forth. And on things like in this case, last modified by me, it may be unclear to us which one we last modified because we do so many different things and we don't really remember last time we did that. So I like to have it. Now remember, this is in the down motion. Let's see what happens if we change this back to name. Aha. So look, it's keeping it in that reverse order. So now we see the Z's are at the top and the ... or the punctuation marks are down at the bottom. And the same thing for our files that are down below. So now we want to change the sort order. And you can make an assumption that if the arrow's pointing up, It means that it's in an ascending order from lowest to highest. You're going up higher, higher. That's why Z's are here, and then the reverse. But sometimes that gets a little confusing too. But at least we know now we're back to where we were. And because I don't want it to switch on me by accident, what are we going to do? We're going to go refresh the page. And then hopefully it'll stay just like that. And there we go. So why would you want to have some of these? Well, it might be because maybe you're trying to find something. Maybe you're trying to locate something that you worked on or you modified not too long ago, or someone else says, hey, I worked on that folder or that file, you know, someone in your department, and you want to go find that. And so you can go to last modified. Well, that's okay for a search thing, but I'm here to tell you that the search option up here, which we'll get to towards the end of the class, is just so stellar. It's improved over the years. And in the last year, they've kicked it up a notch where it's so fantastic. I don't ever see a reason for needing these, although you might find one, and just know they're available. But for our purposes today, we're going to keep it in the name sort order, alphanumeric from lowest to highest, and that includes the files. And even if we switch up here and put it in the list view, remember it's going to be the same way, alphanumeric. So it goes all the way to the Z's in our folders, and then starts over punctuation mark into numbers up to the higher numbers, and eventually getting into the alphabet, just like that. So here we go. Let's go back to grid view. All right. So we've talked about just the way that this kind of presents here. This is kind of like our desktop, if you will. And these are kind of like folders, or maybe links to getting to places where we could do some other stuff. We've already looked at storage and kind of saw how that's done. So even if we're in the grid view, just know that storage is always in the list view, and there's no option up here to change it to a grid view. So that's just the way that they happen to do that. That's kind of interesting. All right, so let's go ahead and take a look at trash real quick. That's one. We can take a look at it. Well, there's no items in the trash. Well, that's probably because I've been gone for a month or more. And so all the things that I had thrown in there are gone. We're going to be putting some things in the trash today, and we're going to be restoring some things. And so we'll have a chance to work with this a little bit more. Start is kind of like favorites. We're not going to go there just yet. I'll show you that in just a little bit. Recent is exactly what it sounds like. Let's go ahead and click on that for now. So today, we certainly did. I opened up these and looked at them. I shared those with you. This is something I was looking at earlier about sharing some different things that I did. And yeah, there's the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 things that I worked on today. I thought I had worked on other ones. So sometimes when you open something up, it doesn't necessarily make the recent, but if you open it up and you've changed it, you can be guaranteed that it's going to be in the recent. So here's something earlier in the week. I did an open lab yesterday for Excel, and these are some of the things we use for that. And then earlier this year, and so on and so forth. And so it's in that order from most recent down to the furthest away. And then at some point, you might something that says last year or older or something. Now, again, let's talk about the fact that every click of the mouse, every click of the keyboard or stroke of the keyboard is all interacting, not with our computer's hard drive, but through our browser, which is our window to the World Wide Web, to the Google server farms. Things can happen, things that are weird, and you're not quite sure why it's happening. And just know that you will experience that at some point. It's not you losing your marbles. It's just one of the countless variables that can happen with a free app that you're getting that's coming to you near the speed of light through the internet from the Google server farm. So I was teaching a class, a Google Drive class, a couple months back, and we went to the recent. And guess what it said? Today. And it had like 5 or 6 things. And the next one said today. And it had like 10 or 15 things. And then the next category said today. And it went down about 30, 40, 50 different things on multiple different todays that I knew that I had not opened up in the last 24 hours. And it was completely spun around and backwards. And it's not something I did. There's no other buttons I can click to change to say, give me 10 different versions of what's most recent from today. So strange things do happen, and it has to do with packets of information getting lost or whatever. And then this is a representation of what's going on in the Google servers, and maybe I don't know, maybe it had a virus or something. But you know what? I went back and the next day and it was completely normal and it looked like this. So just know that weird things can happen. Shared with me. We're going to get to that in a little bit because there's all kinds of stuff to explain about that. Real quick, we're just going to look at shared drives. You may or may not have this in your department. This is something that the Google administrator has set up within your department. Maybe your program manager or director has said, hey, we need to have a place where everybody in our department gets this stuff when I share it. And so you can actually have a shared drive, which is kind of like shared with me. But the difference is this is in a more organized thing. And so let's just take a look at this real quick. So I'm just going to go ahead and click on it. And so now we're no longer in my drive. We're in shared drives, okay? And this is kind of highlighted to let us know. So here it is, IT trainers. There's 4 people beside myself. There's a total of 5 of us. Here's our training calendars. This was something that was important back at the IMC. We could only fit in a few people. You know, I could only teach 3-5 times a week because other instructors needed time. So we had to have a calendar. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to drill down on this and just take a look at this folder is in essence what that is. And so now we're inside the shared drive, but we're in the training calendars. And so in here, suggested. So it's kind of serving up some of the last ones that were looked at. So you can see the different dates that are here. And then you can see our folders from the different years. All right. And so just for fun, I want to go back to a busy time pre-COVID 2018, and I'll click on that. And so inside the shared drive, which is for our trainers, inside the training calendars folder, inside the 2018, I have all of these Google Docs or basically the calendars written, all the PeopleSoft classes, all the PowerSchool classes, all of the Google and Microsoft classes, as well as other departments that used our training labs. And so we have all of that stored there. Well, that's pretty cool. And I'm not even going to bother clicking on any of these because it's not important. But what I was sharing with you is that those are our shared drives. And we just have a couple different parts of it. So you may or may not have those. And it's different than share with me. I'm going to go ahead and just click on this just to see what it looks like. And so look at this. We have a suggested. We keep seeing that, right? Wherever we are, it's suggesting different things. So one of my co-trainers, David Marcelino Benavides, real great guy. We were sharing at one point the calendar that I showed you earlier, and I've kind of taken it over because I'm doing all of the Google stuff and the Microsoft stuff now. And so it's suggesting that because it's something that was shared with me originally. And in there I have folders. And if you look on these folders, every one of them has the shared icon because they've all been shared with me. All right. So when you share a folder with someone else and you're not doing it in a shared drive, but just a regular shared, it's going to show up in that person's drive. And again, where are we? We're in my sandy.net Google Drive. And so those are the folders that are shared with me. All right. And then here's all the files. Okay. And so every one of these files was shared with me. We got PDFs. Here's a Word doc. Here's a Google Doc. Here's a MP4, and so on and so forth. And again, I like to have these in the grid view so I can kind of see what they are. But if I want to, I can always go up there and switch it to the list view. So we're going to get more into the shared with me, but that's enough for that right now. And then, of course, if we want to get back to my drive, I told you that we can click here, or guess what? We can click here as well. And so we go back to the drive and there's a suggested thing. And I keep bringing this up because there's a place where we can change that. We're going to see that in not too long. So there's my drive. And this right here, priority, is something that came around in the last maybe 8 or 12 months, give or take. And let's just take a look at it real quick. So instead of suggested, it has priority. That's the folder that we're in. And it's got some tiles here of different things. And so let's take a look at it real quick. You opened today. I did. That's our website. This is our calendar. I opened it today. Another one. Open this one today. I did. And this one, we can't quite see all of it, but I hit this arrow and oh, look, there's a whole bunch more. And so unlike the suggested in the other places, or even in the recent, recent's by time today and earlier this week and last month and all that, this priority one is going to give you a few more. How many does it give you? Well, it stops right about there. So I'm guessing about 15 or so. And so it'll tell you why it's sort of serving this up. And again, it's kind of a suggestion. It's something I opened yesterday, whatever, maybe it's something I want. It's right here in this priority thing, okay? And then down here it says workspaces. Well, I have not created any new workspaces. And there's a reason I haven't done that. Because I'm teaching the Google Drive class and I'm teaching people that are brand new to Google Drive, I'm trying to make it look like what someone that for the first time opens up their Sandy.net Google Drive using their Sandy.net email address, what they're going to see. And so if I start creating these workspaces, and look, suggested workspace. So I've got the instructional technology calendar with my coworker, also the websites that I have. Maybe these are workspaces, or maybe I want to create a whole unique one where if I'm going to be working with the APE department every month or something like that, and I want to have all my stuff in one spot, I could create a workspace called APE /PE department, and everything that I work on with Becky, with all of you, I could store in that. Well, that's kind of cool. So it's a new workspace that I can create. Well, wait a minute. Didn't we already have some way to do that? Yeah, I'll go back to Drive, and I could just have a folder that says APE /PE. And so you can see how you can get used to one way of doing it or whatever. But again, because by default right now, this is what you see. And of course, we can modify it by making it list view or changing the order, and so it gets confusing. But because this is what we see when we first go to it, I'm not going to create a priority just yet. But you can experiment with that. And it's even serving up a couple of examples of what they think, what Google thinks, an algorithm anyway, machine learning, what it thinks you might want to use as a workspace. And not to confuse you further, but you can make one of those priority workspaces, because that's what these are. You can make that your homepage. Wait, what? Yep. So once you created this workspace, we'll just say the APE PE one that I just mentioned, and I keep all of my folders and files in there, all the different things that I'd be doing with the APE PE department, and that's great. But if it's something I'm doing all the time, and I might think about maybe having a workspace for the IT trainers, because maybe I'm interacting with them on a daily basis or something. If I want to see that when I open up Drive, instead of this or Drive homepage, we could do that. And I'll show you where you can make that change. But again, I'm not going to make that change because I'm teaching this class. So you can experiment and learn a little bit more about priority and all of that by clicking on there and doing different workspaces. But and that's enough said for that for right now. So real quick, what we're going to do is we're going to click on another icon that's up here. So we have this one called Settings. And so I'm going to click on it. And so we have some options right off the bat. We can go directly into Settings, or we can get Drive for desktop. That's so you can work offline or be able to set up things. That's a whole other thing that we're not going to get into today. There's some keyboard shortcuts, but let's take a look at Settings. And by the way, what we're doing is we're kind of clicking around, kind of exploring and looking to see what the different options are, whether it's Google Drive or any Google app or any app you ever have in the future. To learn it, to understand it better, take some time and poke around. And yes, it's true, if you start clicking on things and making changes, you may not know how to change them back. But as far as looking around and becoming familiar with what the options are, maybe not making all those changes right off the bat, but seeing what they are, that's a very good thing to do. So again, we're in Settings. How do we get here? We just click right there and then click on Settings. And then we get this Settings dialog box, we'll call it. All right, so first thing we see is storage. Gives us the information right there. That's cool. We also have it down here. All right. Convert uploads. Convert uploaded files to Google Docs editor format. Mine is unselected. My coworker, David Benavides, Marcelino, I think I got that name right, Marcelino Benavides, fun name to say. I believe that he has that checked. What does that mean? Well, if every time I bring into Drive, whether I put it in my folder or a new folder, or I just have it part of the files that make up my Drive, if it's a Microsoft Word or Microsoft Excel file, I can automatically change all the Word documents into a Google Doc, and I can automatically change all of the Microsoft Excel files into a Google Sheet. And it also works as well with anything. So like PowerPoint, let's try that. PowerPoint is a Microsoft product. It's kind of the slides thing that you do. Well, Google has a version of that called Google Slides. And so if this box is selected, and I'm not going to select it because I don't want to change that, every time I bring in one of those different files, in this case, Microsoft files, they'll automatically be switched over into the Google version of it and keep the data. And it works pretty well. We're actually going to do this. We're actually going to import these things. I'm going to do an example of that in just a second. And so we're actually going to be doing what this is saying it would do automatically. We're going to do it one step at a time. And that's the way I prefer to do it. And quite frankly, the reason is because I can store unlimited things that are Microsoft in my Sandy.net Google Drive. And that means I can store a Word document or an Excel document and turn it into a Google Doc. And now I have both the original in Microsoft and then the new one in the Google version. And so I could have both of them there, and then I have that original. And if I ever lose that original somewhere else, where is it being stored? In my drive. Where's the drive? In the cloud. And I could always go back to that original Microsoft file in this case, and then download it and have a copy of it. And because we're not worried about how much storage, that's a great idea. But that's what that button does. All right. So someone in a class a couple years ago said, "Hey, Mr. J, English is not my first language. Actually, it's French, but I also speak German and I speak Spanish." I said, "That's great." They said, "Is there any way I can change my Google Drive to French?" And I said, "I have no idea." So guess what we did? Something I suggest that all of us do when we're trying to learn something, you Google it to find out. So I Googled it and I found out that instead of saying priority and my drive and all that, like let's say it was Spanish they wanted to do, instead of trash, it would say basura, right? Or reciente, or something like that. And so all of these would be in that new language, and everything that we clicked on, and where it says folders and files, everything would be in that language. So how do you get to that? In settings, right there in language. And you can choose up to like 5 languages, and then you can toggle between them if you want to. And that just means that everything you're reading is going to be in that language. So yes, you can change the language. That's pretty cool. This is for working offline. We're not going to get into that part today. Density, haven't quite figured this one out. But again, because I'm teaching the class, the default is comfortable, cozy, compact. That has to do with how close things are together. And I'm guessing that this is something that came about because if you're working on your laptop and your laptop has to be a touch screen, you may want some things spread out a little bit so your finger's not hitting 2 options at the same time. And so that has to do with the way that things appear. But again, we're going to leave it on the default one because I'm teaching this class. I don't want to change it. And let's look at a couple other things we have down here. Show suggested files in my drive and shared drives. Oh, we've seen that a few times. Yeah, let's see if I can move this. Oh, I can. So I can't move it too far. But remember the suggested that we see here? It's kind of grayed out. But the different things opened earlier today, I can get rid of that. All I got to do is deselect that. And let's see what the next one says. Show suggested files and shared with me. Okay, well, I can get rid of the suggested one there. So I'm just going to go ahead and click this real quick and look what happened. Here's my my little navigation bar, my breadcrumb trail. Here's the banner telling me that, hey, you can block people. And then there's folders and files. No longer are the suggested there. And that's something that I was able to do in settings. And I'll go ahead and put that back because that's the way it comes by default. And look down here, make priority my default homepage. What? So instead of when you open it up and you see what we've been looking at for the last hour plus, you can create a new workspace in your priority. And if you want to, every time you open up your Google Drive in your Sandy.net Google Drive, it'll go to that priority web page or whatever. I don't call it a web page. Actually, it kind of is. But that place where you can click on the different workspaces or whatever. And that's how you do it right there. Okay. So that's what settings is about. But there's more than that. Just so you know, that Google Sheets, Google Docs, those are all apps. There's all kinds of apps out there. There's thousands of them, and not all of them are Google, but they work with Google. And you can go here to find more information about those apps and get more apps and all that. For our class, we're not going to get too far into that, but notifications, let's take a look at this. So right now I have a few things selected here. So one, it says email. We'll just start down here. It says, get all updates about Google Drive items via email. All right. I like that idea because I have a special place where I store all of my Google notifications so that I can keep track of them. So if someone says, hey, Mr. J, I requested access to something, and maybe editing access or something a while back, and you never gave me that access or whatever, then I can go back and I can find out, you know, when that was sent or if I got the request or whatever, so I can deal with that. But let's look up here. This is browser. Get updates about Google Drive items in your browser. Well, we're in our browser right now. So what are we talking about? You probably have this on your computer. I know this is our home office computer. My wife sometimes uses this for different things. She does Pinterest. She's a pretty crafty lady, I'll tell you. And she likes to do Pinterest crafts and things. And so all the time, little banners are popping over here. Hey, get the latest whatever in Pinterest. Or sometimes I'm getting like advertisements for different things. Or it's saying, hey, Microsoft has, you know, found a fault, or, you know, there's a warning or something like that. We get these messages. Well, if we want information like, hey, such and such wants access, editing access to a certain document or something, it'll show up in here. And so all you got to do that is select that. All right. So I usually don't have it in the browser. I was playing with this earlier today just to see if there's any new features. And so when you click on it, it says, will notify me about what? This is kind of cool. So just newly shared items. That could be handy. You're working on your computer and all of a sudden, you know, Becky sends or shares something with me and I see a little banner shows up there. Of course, I'm going to get the email about that, and we'll see that in just a second. But I can choose for that to pop up or not, or maybe I don't really care, and I could deselect just that one if I want to. All right, request for access. Do I want it coming across my browser? Probably not. Comments, suggestions, and action items. Maybe I do, maybe I don't. Well, I'm going to deselect this because when I'm teaching a class, the last thing I want is all of these things flying across my screen and distracting me and everyone else. And so I prefer just to get it by virtue of email. So how do we do that? We went into settings and we started off in the general. We looked at all these different options here, including about your default home page and whether or not the suggested shows up. And we went to notification. Yes, question. Do we have a question? Maybe we don't. All right, no problem. Yeah, if you have a question or want to see something again, by all means, just unmute your microphone and ask away.
I got a quick question on the, you know how you can change the language? So
yes,
we had a question, we came up with a questionnaire or assessments last year. If we change the language, would it change the language for the docs? So if we sent it.
Great question. I think I saw a name down there. It said Brandon when that first popped up. Brandon, great question. So my understanding of the settings is specific for this particular app, which is Google Drive. And so my understanding of what I practiced with, I only saw these changes like in Spanish is the one that I was playing with because I speak Spanish. And so I was kind of looking at that. And so it is not going to change the names of my folders, for example, although up here, the category of folders, this area, you know, that title, that banner, whatever you want to call that, is going to be in Spanish in this case, and files will be in Spanish, but none of these would change. And none of the files inside there that are stored or down here that actually, let me just jump out here real quick since we pretty much talked about all that so I can move around. None of these are going to change as far as that language. Can you change those? Come back next week when we do Google Docs, and we'll show you when we get into Google Docs that there's places where you can do some different things. And I think language is one of the ones that you can do. We'll have to experiment with that. But does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Perfect. Thank you, Brandon. All right. So excellent question. And so, all right, so moving along here, we're going to pick up the pace. We're going to start getting a little bit more into the weeds and talking about a bunch of different things. And there's so much we have to share, and I apologize for all of the details and the nuances, but that's just the way it is. So hopefully we have kind of a basic grab on just what we're looking at here. Again, we'll get into the search in the drive. We'll talk about new here in just a second, and so on and so forth. But before I actually do that, there's one more button up here, support, the question mark, help. Let's click on that. This is something that's going to knock your socks off. So again, I said that anytime they change an app, the Google support people are already, by the time they change something and something's going to change, information about that change, perhaps videos or step-by-step with screenshots on how to do it and how it's used and so on and so forth, is all available to you. And if you start Googling stuff and say, hey, how do you do this? How do you do that? And any of the apps, whatever you're asking, it's going to take you to the Google support pages. That's why earlier today you saw my really cool online handbook, which is nothing more than just a bunch of links to the Google support pages we talked about, where when you click on one of those, you got all the instructions and all of that. That's just really cool. But look at this little help button here. So right there it says help, training, updates. Okay, well, let's take a look. So if I click on help, it's going to open up this little place here and says, what do you want help with? And then it's going to serve up some things, share files from Google Drive, find and recover a file. I'm guessing these are just some of the most recent things that people are searching for. Remember, Google became Google because they had the greatest searching algorithms out there, and they're improving them all the time. And so it's going to give us as much information as it thinks that we want, and we can search for it right there just by clicking on that help. But let's look at the other options. Training. Well, before we get to that, I'm going to click on updates, because when I clicked on this earlier today, I was kind of blown away. So let's see what we have here. So a little help window opens up. We can still search for stuff, but look what's new in Google Drive. So April 2020, that was over a year ago. Share in Google Drive, docs, sheets, slides, and forms. Something changed. That is to say, something in here when these features change. And so here's a place, and this is just one of a few places. Again, you can Google this. You can say, what are the latest changes in Google Drive? And it will take you to the support pages where it'll give you a lot more detail. But this is our little help question button here, and it already gives us some basic information. Now it's easier to share files and folders with specific people. Share only with those who need, and it's got this information here. I got a link I can click on. I can click on this one right here. And if I do that, watch what happens up here on my browser. It should open up a new window somewhere. Come on. Oh, that's the up down, but I got to click on this link. Come on, Mr. J. All right. So this one's actually going to give it to us right here in this little pop-up window. So that's helpful. But again, if we want to do that on the World Wide Web, then we could just go in and we could start Googling these things. But again, all the different platforms that you might be using, those step-by-step instructions, they're squeezing it all right here into this little help thing. When I did this earlier, it went straight to, I'm not sure why. You know what? I think I did it in my, here's one of those weird things that you just sort of discover as you're going along. Bear with me for a moment. So here's my personal Google account or whatever associated with my Yahoo thing. And let's see what happens when I click on updates. It does the same thing. Okay, I was thinking it was going to open up here because it did that earlier, and I'm not sure why it's not doing that now. Who knows? One of those crazy things that you're always trying to figure out. And so again, this is a good learning opportunity, is just to say that things will happen differently from one time you do it. You did a little bit ago, and in that case, it actually opened up a brand new tab somewhere up here, and I was able to navigate through that. This is the same information, but it's kind of tight. When we clicked on those links, for example, for the Google support pages in the online handbook, and when we clicked on one of those, it gave us this. So what we're seeing here, computer, Android, the different platforms with the different sets of instructions that change when you click on those platforms, all of this information we're seeing on that particular subject is what we're seeing right over here, kind of squished in this smaller space. So why it did it there instead of whatever, I'm not really sure. There could be a number of different reasons, but just know things sometimes are different when you're doing it, and no big deal. We just have to kind of roll with it. But there's a lot of information that's available there all about that one particular topic. And let's see if we can go back. So that's something that changed in April 2020. So here's another one, create pointers to any file or folder with shortcuts. Aha, this is one that Becky requested that we talk about, which are those shortcuts, and about taking something from shared with me and actually putting it in your drive. It used to be that you could bring it right into your drive and it was no longer in your shared with me, which confused the heck out of all kinds of people, because when you're trying to find it, you can't find it in the share with me thing. You got to go find it in drive somewhere. And so it confused people. So then they switched it. So whatever's shared with you now always stays in shared with me, but you can make a shortcut, or stated differently, a little tile with that little arrow on it that is giving you a link to go wherever it's located. So that's when that happened. Right here, that was in March 2020. And if I want more information about that, then I can click there just like we saw before. And it keeps going back further and further. And let's see, I was hoping they had something in here about, I don't even see the one about the trash can only allowing you 30 days. So clearly not everything's in there, but you can always Google something and get more information about those things. So I thought that that was very helpful to know that those things are there in the updates. So let's click on training. Now that I'm seeing this, maybe it was the training one that I clicked on that gave me the new page. Okay, that makes sense, because in most of the other programs, you click on help, like in Microsoft, it usually pops up in a help window pane where you can do that. And then you have links in there to go to web pages. So what did I do? I just simply clicked on the help and I clicked on training, and it took me to this web page here, and it says, look at all these different options here. I can learn by product. So if I want to just do drive, here's all the topics for drive that are there available. These are all the different sections like this. They may have little videos, they may have step-by-step instructions, they may have little tutorials and different things. So look at this, a drive cheat sheet. I was looking at this earlier and I clicked on it. And so that's kind of cool. Now I have this little sheet. I was trying to figure out how to get this into a PDF. And in the amount of time that I had, I kind of ran out of time to do it. But this little cheat sheet's available to you. And, you know, you can always save this right here and go to your favorites. And then when it says, what are you going to call it? Just call it a drive cheat sheet. And it'll show up here like the office skills training page that I know you're going to save. You could have it right next to it and you click on that and you could always get back to it. So that's one way you could deal with this. But if you look at this, it's going to give you the basics about drive, and that's pretty cool. It talks about, you know, creating new documents, uploading folders and files, and we're going to do that a little bit. And by the way, when you're in drive, why does it say upload a file or a folder? Because we're going to take it off of our computer's hard drive, whether it's a laptop or a desktop computer that I have, and we're going to upload it through our browser to the World Wide Web up to the Google server farms. And so we're uploading that data to there. And then if later we've got a Microsoft something we saved and we need to get that original Microsoft thing back on our computer, then we can download it out of the cloud, out of the Google server farms and onto our computer's hard drive. So anyhow, that's something I just thought of when I saw that. And here's just general information about it, talking about all the different things about the priority, my drive, shared drives, all of these different things, kind of information about it. And so when we get into the shared thing in a little bit, you'll learn about, you know, whether if you're the owner, there's certain things you can do. There they are. If you're an editor, you could do those same things. If you're a commenter or viewer, these are all different options when you share with someone. It just kind of gives you a little heads up on what you can do. And so all this information is in here about Google Drive. This just happens to be the cheat sheet. Let's go back real quick.
Dad, can I ask a real quick question?
Absolutely.
And maybe you're going to answer this, but if something is shared with me and I put it in my drive and it makes it a shortcut, and then something changes in that original document, does it change in my shortcut as well?
Okay, so great question. If the title of it is changed, then in your shortcut icon, the little tile that looks like a shortcut, the title would change there also. But if it's just information inside of it, it's going to change inside of it, but the link would look the same. Does that make sense?
So so if there's a Google Sheet there inside that, if it's a Google Sheet, the content won't change in the Google Sheet, just the title?
Let's take that out of the abstract. All right. So let's say this is a shared one, this April one, it's a shortcut, it's a folder. And let's say you're the one that shared it with me and we're both using this for some reason. And then you change something that's inside there. I'm not going to see that change just on the surface here. This is just the title. And so, but if you, as the owner or an editor, as we saw on that list, you can both rename stuff. If you were to name this to, let's say it doesn't say April 2021 anymore, now it's going to say September 2021. And then with all the contents that's in there, whatever, then the title would change, and it would change for me as well, because it's a shortcut to that. Okay. It's, in other words, this is a pathway that's set up to get to a file. And if you change, and this is where it gets confusing, a folder is actually a file, and it gets confusing. But when you change the name of, in this case, a folder, the pathway to that folder is not going to change. It just has a different name. It's the same as if I were to change the color of it or something like that, which we're going to show how to do in just a second. So then if I go down to, here's a one that was shared or whatever. So we could go to this document here and start changing the calendar or whatever on it. If the name's the same, then this is going to look the same as far as this little icon right here saying that it's a shortcut to that calendar. Does that make sense? Unless we change the name of this, then that would change. Even if we've changed things in here, it's still going to be the same unless we change the name of it. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. They both change then. So, okay.
Perfect. All right. And yeah, I've been trying to go is kind of basic with everything so that we kind of now drill down, and hopefully we've got a good foundation for those of us that are new and are newer at this. And now we're going to get into the weeds. But just knowing your help, you've got these different things that you can look at. And I'm noticing that it doesn't have every change they've made. Like you're not going to find this was changed to red, but you may find that there's something inside there that's different. So again, you don't always get a banner. Banners are great because we're going to see this in just a little bit about blocking people. But so that banner is great. Or like, hey, just remember October. That's why I remember it's October 15th. Can't remember the year, but remember it was October 15th because that banner was up there for like 2 months. And it was basically saying, and by the way, you can make the banner go away at any time by hitting that button. The banner is up there and it's just going to tell you that, you know, something is going to change or whatever. All right, so let's just go ahead and take a look back down here. Now, what we're going to do at this point is we're going to start creating some stuff. So again, you see that some of these are shared. We're going to be doing some sharing, and some of these are colored or whatever. We're going to be doing some of that, but let's make a new folder. Okay, so for our purposes today, I want a folder that's going to be easy to find. And since I have it in alphanumeric order by name, I'm going to create something that's actually going to show up right here. If I created something that starts with a C, then it's going to end up over here. You know, maybe I'll just do that. So here we are. We're in our drive. That's right where we are, right here in our little homepage, if you will. There's a couple ways to do this. I can go up here to new, and I can click on it, and I can create a new folder just by selecting that. If I want to upload a file or another folder, and we're going to be uploading some files here in just a second, that's where I can do that. If I want to create a new doc, a new sheet, a new slide, or any of these other apps, I can do that all here by simply clicking on this button. But here's something important to know. Wherever you are on this drilling down, whatever folder you're in this case, we're in the home page, whatever you do that's new is going to show up where? Right there. And so earlier you saw, you know, going into the April 2021, that was several things deep, and I'll just double click on it real quick. You can see it's several things deep, several folders deep or whatever. If I'm here and I go to the new and I create a new one of these, or I upload a folder or file or create a folder, guess where it's going to end up? Right here inside this. So we'll see it up here. The files will appear here that we upload, and the folders will be right above it because the folders are always above the files. All right, cool. So here's what we're going to do. We can either do a new folder there, or like every program, there's always multiple ways to do it. So I just find a spot, and if I right click on it, look at that. Can't do that everywhere. Doesn't work up here on right clicking. That doesn't happen. But down here or down this way, or maybe between stuff, you know, I could do that. Just remember that if you accidentally select something, that's actually selected, and you start to change different things. So just make sure you're just away from that. If you're trying to create something in your drive, which is what we're doing right now, then certainly we just want to make sure we're there. So I'm just going to say new folder. All right. And just for fun, I'm going to call this today's folder. That's what I usually call folders in a class. So if I see them another day, I like, okay, that from the other day, I know I could throw that away without losing any important stuff. So I'm just going to call it today's folder, and I'm going to go ahead and create it, and let's see where it ends up. So here's our folders. Remember, we're in alphanumeric order. So by the way, if you have this switched or you didn't even know that it was one of these other options, then you're going to be looking around for your folder, and it might show up here or it might show up there, depending on how you have the sort order and by what. But because we called it today's folder, we now see that we have 20 here. We're going to go find the T's. So GOS, there's the T's, today's folder, there it is. All right. So the first thing we can do is we're going to go ahead and we're going to right click on this and see what our options are. So if you come to any of our apps classes where we're learning how to do docs or, you know, Microsoft Word or anything like that, I'm always talking about left click, right click, double click, triple click, depending on where you're at, different things happen. So remember that in Drive, right click does a lot of different things that are pretty cool to work with. So great, that's right there, and I can't see that behind my Zoom stuff, but that's okay. I think the bottom one's a trash can, and we're good. So I simply right-clicked on this. Let's just take a look at some of our options. So it says open with, so if I have another app that I've downloaded that I want to use, if I want to share it with someone, I can do that. I'm going to do that a little bit later. If I want to get a link and then publish that link somewhere so everybody can click on the link and go to this folder, like say everybody from your department, I could do that there. I can also do that in share. If I'm not sure where that folder is, I can find out the folder location. Of course, we can see it's in Drive. Add a shortcut to Drive. This is the option to do that. We're going to see this menu in a lot of different places, and you'll notice that there are 14 of these. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. There's 13, I lied. It changes depending on what you click on and whether something's shared with you, how old something is, whether something's been modified. This right click menu will change. I saw one earlier today that we'll see in a bit that had 16 options. And most of them that I was looking at earlier had 14. This one I counted real fast, and I think it said 13. So depending on what you right click on, it will change. But for the most part, you will see these options in pretty much all of them. But sometimes the move to is grayed out. You can't use it. And there's a reason for that. And we'll get to that. But let's take a look at some of these ones down here that we can look at. Rename or change color. So right away, I could figure out how we made all these different colors. I simply right click on it and change color, and I just pick one. I'm going to go ahead and make this red just because red stands out pretty good. That's great. And you know what? I don't want to call it today's folder. I want to rename it. So I can just right click on it and go down to rename. And what I'm going to do, because I want to show up at the bottom, I'm just going to give it a couple of Z's because it's just a temporary folder. And then I'm going to call it, let's call it APE. And let's see. Not always when we're naming files can we use a forward or backslash because it's programming language. Let's see if it'll let us do it here, because Google tries to make things real easy for us. So we're going to call that, I'll just say class folder. All right, there we go. So we're going to say, okay. All right, well, it moved. Where did it go? Oh yeah, alphanumeric, there it is. And isn't that nice? Even though it's a file, in this case, it's a folder, but it's being stored or whatever, Google allows you to use some of the programming symbols, which Microsoft will not let you use when you're naming stuff. So that's pretty cool. Thank you, Google, for making it a little bit easier. All right, so there's our little folder. So right now I'm going to drill down on it and double click. So look at that. That banner is still there about blocking people. We'll get rid of that a little bit later. So drop files here or use a new button. All right, remember that new button? We talked about uploading files. Why is it uploading? If we're uploading a folder or a file, because we're taking it off our computer and through the browser here, it's going to go up to the Google server farm and be stored there for all time and eternity until we get rid of it. And so that's what we're going to do here. And so whether we're using the new one here or we right click over here, anything that we do that's new is going to land where? inside this folder. Can we then go back and then move something in here? You bet. We can right click on it and it says move it, and we can move it to somewhere else. But that's the most important thing, because when we're brand new at Drive and we're trying to set things up and we're trying to do all this different stuff, it's nice to know where things are going to go. So pay attention to this breadcrumb trail that's up here. All right. So at this point, what I want to do is I want to upload some files. But before I do that, right here, it says drop files here. Well, what the heck does that mean? I want to pull the curtain back a little bit. And so now you can see the desktop of our home computer here that my wife and I share in our home office. And I've got folders with files in them. Here's an Excel file, just a file by itself, a couple more Excel files, a Word file. So if I want to, I can left click and drag it down here, and look what it says. It says plus copy. I'm not going to let this go. I just left clicked and dragged it, but I'm still holding down my left button. And I just wanted to point out that it's not going to erase what's on my computer up here. It's going to make a copy. That's why it says plus copy. And that's the same with anything that we upload to Drive. It's not going to erase anything that's on our original. We get to keep that. So I'm just going to put it back. And if we want to, we can get a folder with a bunch of files in it, with maybe many more folders with a whole bunch more files in those. And we can do the same thing, left click and drag it down. And as you can see, it's going to make a copy. So what's on our desktop computer, in this case, our home office computer, it's going to stay there. So they'll have the original copy there, and we'll have a new one down there. So that's what I wanted to point out. And that's how the drag and drop things work. Of course, there's a lot of things we can't see behind there. So drag and drop isn't always the best way to do it. Just going to double click, make that back big again. So we're going to just upload some files. So Becky, I'm not sure if you were able to send those out yet. I was having trouble with my my Outlook client. I wasn't sure when it got to you, but anyway, you will get some of these files that I'm going to be using right now, so you can practice this later if you want to, or you can just use your own files to do it, and you'll know where you have that on your computer. So I know that I have mine in here in my Google Drive basics thing. So I've got some files that I want to upload. And if you remember in settings, I'm not going to automatically change all these things to Google anything. I'm going to keep the Excel file Excel. I'm going to keep the Microsoft Word file, a Microsoft file, and all that. But here's some of them that I want. I'm going to go ahead and do them all at the same time. So how can I do them all at the same time? Well, since I don't have a box over here to select, I selected that one and it turned to blue. If I select another one, it's only gonna let me do one at a time. But if I start with one of them and then I hold down the control key on my keyboard, now I can click the next one. So now I can do more than one. I'm still holding down my control key, and there's more that I'm interested in. I'm interested in this PDF waiver form, which I also sent to you. And I think that's the last of the ones that we're going to do for right now. So there's 3 of them. There's a PDF, which is an Adobe product, not Google. And there's 2 Microsoft files, one Excel, one Word. So that's what I want. I'm gonna go ahead and say open. And we get this little thing over here. It says, hey, uploading 3 items. Boom, it went that fast. It says upload complete. And there they are. And so now, because we have it in a grid mode instead of list view, I get these little tiles to kind of look at what they are. And so here's the Excel training workbook and the Word document and the PDF. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to step away from our Google Drive here real quick. And by the way, where did those land? Right here, because this is where we were. So that's important to remember. We're going to take a look at those and see what they look like, because we're going to be doing some changes to them. So I just wanted you to see what they were. This is an Excel file that, and by the way, remember I said it's not going to erase what's on your computer. So here's an example of that. I simply uploaded this file to my Google Drive, but I still have the original that I'm now going to open and take a look at. So I'm going to shrink this a little bit. Let's see if I can do this fast. Okay, and change the way this looks a little bit. Let's see, come on. Let me get in here. No, I'm not gonna let me do it. That's fine. Trying to move some things out of the way for so it's not, my zoom windows are not blocking. Come on, work with me. That's not what I want. Trying to get the end of that. There it is. Okay, so I can move it up a little bit. All right, so now I can see the bottom of it. I can even pull it down just a little bit more. Okay, so here's the Excel file. What is it? It's just stuff that we practice with. There's in this one workbook, there's different sheets, and this is where we practice different formulas and functions that we use in those classes. And by the way, you're welcome to come to those classes once I load them all in here by the end of the week, or you can watch the videos of previous classes so you can learn the same stuff. But all these different sheets that are in here are all part of this particular workbook or whatever. And so that's where we're at here. And I just wanted you to see what that looks like in the Excel form. And then don't save the changes. Oh boy. Document recovery test, no, remove files. Okay, I don't know what that's saying, but that's fine. And then the other one that we just uploaded was this one. It's a Microsoft Word file. You can tell that I haven't opened these up in a while. And it's basically a couple pages from 4 different authors and quotes from various books from each, a couple of my favorite authors, and that's what it looks like. So there's Hemingway, biographical information, quotes from a couple of different books, and then Alexander Dumas, and then the Count of Monte Cristo and some other things or whatever. And that's what that looks like. And that's important because when we switch them into the Google version, I want you to see the difference. Then the last one was a PDF. Now I just went on the San Diego Unified webpage, staff portal, went into, I don't know, payroll department somewhere, and I was trying to find a PDF to download. And that's what this is. It's a PDF, all right? And this is what it looks like. And so this has something to do with, you know, your insurance coverage or whatever, something that you would have to print out and sign and all that, and then, you know, copy it in your copier or something, send it back or whatever for the payroll department to make those changes. Well, we get the questions all the time. Can you in Google Docs, can you actually take a PDF and can you edit that PDF? Do you have the ability to go in there and do stuff? Well, you can and you can't. And we're going to show you a little bit about that in just a second. So that's that particular one. We can make all those go away real quick and get back to where we were. All right. So there they are. So what we're going to do at this point is just point out that in this folder here, we have 1, 2, 3 files. None of them are Google anything. Let's get rid of that because we don't need it. And let's open up the first one. I'm going to double click on it. And by the way this works has changed over the last couple of years. And so I'm curious to see if there's any new changes. Looks like they haven't changed it since then, but here we go. So when I double clicked or drilled down on this particular file here, an Excel file, a new tab opened up and we can see that it's a Google Sheet, right? That's what we're looking at. And so here is that first page. It looks a little different because of course, Google Sheets is different than Excel. And just for the record, Excel and Word are very powerful. I call them like hypercars or like Lamborghinis compared to the Google versions, which are more like a, you know, Volkswagen, a nice Volkswagen, but you can't do quite as much. And if you come to our Microsoft classes, we'll show you exactly how powerful they can be, and they do some amazing stuff. But anyway, we can see down there, and now I can see that I got 2. Okay, trying to get to the bottom so I've got my stuff in the way. Give me a second. Double click, move that up there, and now I can get to the bottom of it. There we go. I can move it up. Now I can see the bottom. Okay, so just to show you, it looks just like the other one. There was the last name first. Yeah, it looks a little different, you know, different size and all that. But here's all of the worksheets that were part of that. That were all part of that Excel file, but it's in Microsoft, or I'm sorry, in Google Sheets, all right? And that's that, except for it's not yet. We're gonna go back to Drive, and this is important for you to see. We still have 3 files here. This is the one that we drilled down on, and we got this. And if we look closely, look at that. The .xlsx is a Microsoft format. This is still a Microsoft Excel file. But Mr. J, you've lost your marbles because I'm looking at Google Sheets, so clearly this is a Google Sheet. Nope, right now it is a Microsoft file that Google is allowing you to edit, change, add formulas, change functions, whatever. And you can do that the same in Word. And you know, with the Word one we're going to see in just a moment, but it's most definitely an Excel file. Now here's the deal. Just know that from what I've read online, don't ever do lots of work on something in Google Sheets that's a Microsoft product, because they don't play nicely together. Stated differently, you spend all afternoon and putting a bunch of formulas and data in here, and maybe creating a few new sheets down here, part of your workbook, and you spend all these hours working on it. You come back the next day and that work has disappeared. You can't find it. And what's more, you can't do the classic Google thing, which is go into the history, different versions, and go back and restate something, because it's just plain old disappeared. Well, Mr. J, why are we learning this? Well, it's because when you, whether it's automatic or using the settings button where you make it automatic, or like what we did, where we just double clicked on this, you got to turn it into a Google Sheets 100%. Not hard to do, but let's see how you do it. You just go here to the File tab, and you drop down, and right there it says Save as a Google Sheet. Watch what happens up here in my browser when I do that. Save as Google Sheet. It opens up another tab. All right, and it looks exactly the same. And so there's the full names, last name, comma, space first, where we practice all those different things. It looks just like the other one, but notice there's no extension here. And what's more, it's now a separate file. This is the Microsoft version. This is the complete Google version. It's a Google Sheet 100%, but just know that you now have two files. And if I make any changes on this version here, it will not affect, in this case, the original, which is a Microsoft one. And stated differently, if I make any changes now on this file, which is a Microsoft version, and I'm doing it in Google Sheets, make any changes at all, it does not affect this one, which is 100% Google Sheet. Let's look at that a different way. Go back to here. Remember we had 3 files? Now we have a 4th one. So these are in fact 2 separate files. So again, any changes I now make in this one do not affect this one. Any changes I make in this version will not affect that one. So why on earth would I want to have the original and that one? That's confusing, because if I start to make changes here, and what if I accidentally start making changes there and all that? Well, that's easy enough. Why don't we make a place where we can store all the Microsoft stuff? Okay, right click, new folder. There we go. Let's call it Microsoft. All right. So now we got a new folder, create. And because we were here in this particular folder, that's where that folder is going to be created. And there it is. Remember, folders always come before files. Microsoft. Well, you know what? Let's right click on that. Oh, that looks familiar. Change the color. Microsoft's usually blue. We'll make it blue. Okay, that's great. All right. So now I can take this Excel file and I can stick it right up in there. And there's my original stored. And we get this little banner that says, hey, you just moved something, whatever. Was that what you want to do? You want to undo it? Well, you got to make up your mind pretty quick, because in about 5 seconds it disappears. And oh no, now what do you do? Well, now if you want to move it, you can right click on it and you can move it to somewhere. And you can certainly use those features to do that. Or you could add it to start. You can do all kinds of stuff. And we'll get to some of that in just a second. But let's go back to these 2 files here. So now we want to drill down on this micro. Yes.
This is Katrina. We are approaching 3 o'clock. Is there a way that we can really look at the shared with me? Because Becky and I share a ton of stuff with our staff, and I've noticed that some of our staff members continually work within shared with me. Can we go to that? Just because I know it's approaching a 3 o'clock hour right now, and that piece is pretty important to us.
Okay, there's a couple of different ways we could do this. One, I'm willing to go as long as we need to. I realize some of you may need to take off somewhere else. And I apologize that it's taken this long to do all this stuff. I've tried to do this as basic as I could, just because of our audience. And I was told that we have some very much newbies, and then people are more advanced. And we definitely need to cover that. And so there's a couple different ways we could do this. One, I could continue with building towards that, which is what I'm trying to do to get to the shared, which is coming up shortly in probably about 10 minutes or so, and then work into that. And if someone has to leave at 3, I am recording this, and I will make this recording available to you all. It can be, the link to it could be emailed to you or whatever. And so that could be seen later. Or I can stop what I'm doing and go straight to that, but I would be rushing through it to finish by 3 o'clock, and it would be incomplete and a little bit choppy. Would it be okay if we continue on, and if someone can't be here for longer than that, we can you can access it through the video. Would that work?
Yes, thank you.
And then also, just so you know, at the very end of all of this, we're going to open up to Q&A, and we can go as deep into the weeds as anybody wants to. We can go right down that rabbit hole and maybe find Alice. And then also in about 4 or 5 weeks, whenever it was, we have the open labs. That's on those open labs is where we're just going to spend a couple of hours just going in any direction that we want to. So this has all been prepared for you guys specifically, and I apologize that it started off very slow and all that. I'm just trying to give as many details as possible, because when you're new at this stuff, it is bizarre, and it's amazing how many different things can change in front of you. And it's almost to the point where you just want to give up. I know, because I had to teach this stuff, and I had about 2 weeks to teach my first one. And in that 2 weeks, I'll just tell you, the first couple of classes were a disaster, because trying to make an understanding and assessment of how things are working and why, and then all of a sudden they change and they're different when you're, doing that in front of a class with, actual sharing stuff. Anyway, it's just, there's so much to it. So I thought it would be best if we could just do the more thorough one. And again, if you guys have to go somewhere, I apologize. It's just my attempt to make it more thorough, and that stuff will be available to you through the video if we could do that.
Sounds great. Thanks.
All right, thank you. And great question. And I'm sorry this is taking so long. It just means I'm sharing maybe a little too much stuff, but I'm trying to keep everybody on board. And so I'll go a little bit quicker at this point, because we can go back and watch it. So if you miss something because I went too quick, maybe we'll just rely on that video. So what I was going to say was, we already saw these 2 different versions, in the Microsoft when we drilled down on it. And so what we're going to do is we're going to drill down real quick on the Microsoft Word one, and it's going to open it up. And we saw that just a little bit ago, what it looked like. And yeah, it's William Faulkner's the first one, followed by Ernest Hemingway with the quotes from the different books and so on and so forth. Well, that looks exactly like what we saw in Microsoft Word. And so Google is really good at doing that. And in fact, it is still a Microsoft Word document, which Google is allowing you to edit. But just like the other one, the Excel, from what I understand, you do not want to be doing major changes to all these different things in this mode. It will let you do it. I can go in here and change the font, change the size, change the spacing, add pages, whatever, and you can do that, and it will save right there in your Google Drive. That's pretty cool, except for when you come back the next day and a lot of that stuff is missing or whatever. So you want to get it to 100% Google format. All you have to do is just go down to in the file button there and say save as a Google Doc, and then you'll see that there it is, just that fast. You have 2 versions now. So there's the original one, which is Microsoft, and now there's the 100% Google Doc. And so we go back here to our drive, and now we're back to 4 again. Why? Because we have a new one. So there we see they kept them in blue. That's nice. So we don't want to get confused when we're working on this stuff later. We'll take the original. I'll just stick it inside the Microsoft one. We're down to there. And I just wanted to share this with you real quick. So if you just double click on the PDF or whatever, right now we're in preview mode. That looks exactly like the PDF, because that is the PDF. It's a preview mode. But I can't click on any of this stuff and start to edit it, change it, whatever. It's just the preview mode. And how do I know that? Because I can go right back and there it is. So double click, and up here, of course, it's giving us the option to put it into a Google Doc. What I will tell you before I click on this is that Google optical character recognition software that they have is great with letters and numbers. Perfect. It'll even get the same font on almost every case, even if it's a crazy font. It'll get the same font, usually the same size, the numbers all are right. Everything you see written down here is going to show up. What they're less good at are these other features like checkboxes, and in this case, a table where you have different parts to it. So we're going to open it in Google Docs real quick, because I get this question all the time. Can we actually edit stuff like a PDF? You can. So if I did this 2 years ago, we wouldn't even seen this table right here. It's not that good, but now it's getting better. So now we have a table, but some things have moved around. Here, the checkboxes are gone, and now this is moved over. And you remember down here where it said employee signature, and then it had a line, and then it said date, there's another line. It's now pushed it to another page, but we're here 100% in Google Docs. It's no longer a PDF. We could go in here, we could change it back if we needed to. And then, But if that's what you're trying to do is get a PDF so you can edit it and make it your own, that's great. But if you're just trying to get a PDF from payroll or something and then fill it out, just copy it or print it out, fill it out, and then scan it and send it back. It'd be a lot easier because this will take you some time. But I just wanted to let you know that that was an option of what you could do. And sure enough, you go back here, back to our thing here. So now we have the docs version of that PDF and the original PDF. And just going real quick, new folder. I'm just going to call this Adobe, since PDFs are Adobe. There it is, create. And there it is, it's alphanumeric order. So we'll just put that right over there. Okay, so there we go. We've got some things that we've uploaded and we've put all that there. And let's go ahead and go to the shared. We'll jump to that. I was going to do a couple other things, but we could do that next. Shared drive, not shared drive, shared with me. Again, this is something that's set up for your department by the Sandy.net Google Domain Administrator. We're looking at the shared with me. All right. So this is something that has changed quite a bit in the last couple of years. And it, for me, was one of the most confusing things. And if you've been around for a little while, you might be thinking the same thing. It was very confusing. So you can see that I still have this by name and I still have it in the alphanumeric order. So numbers first, followed by, you know, the letters, whatever. Here's the folders. You can see that every one of these folders is shared with me right here. And then here's the file. Let's make this full size again. So we can see them all. So here's yellow. So here's all the different files that are down here. They're also in alphanumeric order. And we can see what the different ones are. So every one of these has been shared. And so what I'm going to do at this point is say, if I want to find out information about these, I'm going to scroll down to what I was looking at earlier. This one right here. I just left clicked on it one time. And if I click on any one of these, I'm selecting them. So I'm going to right click real quick on this one with the horse. Can you remember the horse? And you remember that we have all these different things that we could do. And if we take the time to count, we might see that there's one more extra one here, and there's different reasons why that changes. But we see all the different options: preview, open with something else, share, get a link, do all these different things, right? When I click away from that, let's do that. So I'm trying to click somewhere so it's not selected. If we look up here, we've got the help button, we've got the settings, we've done that. Here's the apps grid, the waffle sometimes called. And that's all we have is these things that we normally do. Watch what happens when I click on it. Now we have all these options, plus there's a more button. And now we have all of those options. Well, every one of these that you see up here is available to you just by right clicking. It's the same thing, just two different locations, all right? So let's go with that. But by selecting this, I'm going to, again, click away to get rid of that. The button, that's one of the most important ones. And again, we can do it here where it says view details. I could do it also right here, view details. We're going to do that real quick. So this is going to tell us a little bit about this thing that's shared with us. And we're going to be using this information button on quite a few more things that we're going to get into. So first of all, it's moved over. Since we now have this window pane open, things have had to kind of scrunch together and it's moved. So just know that your desktop is going to change as far as its appearance, depending on what you have open and what you're working on. So there it is. Let's find out about this. So this person here is the owner, Allison Yamada. One of the persons come to many of our classes years ago. And then it was shared with me. That's my Sandy.net me. And if we look down here a little bit, we have more information about this. There's the owner, when it was last modified by her, when it was open, created, all that. And hold on real quick. So if you got a question, go ahead and unmute yourself. I'm just going to turn that off real quick. And so this is basic information about this particular one that's shared with us. All right, check this out. There's also an activity section of this. And depending on what's happened, whether it's something you've done or what someone else has done, in this case, Allison, it goes back all the way to 2017 and earlier, information about this. So the first thing is everything that's been shared with you is going to be in your shared with me folder, if you will. That's about the best way we can call it, shared with me. And it didn't used to be that. In other words, if I took something out of here and I put it in my drive into a folder somewhere, then it was no longer in the shared with me. They changed that because now you can't take it out of here, but you can make a shortcut to it. That was one of those things we saw in the help thing. So that's the first thing that you need to know. And but anyway, so this is one that's just from a long time ago. I'm going to go ahead and we'll leave it on that for right now. Okay, there's a couple of things I was going to do first. I'm kind of jumping around here, but that's okay. We're going to look at a few other things real quick. So here's my drive. And if I want to get out of share with me, of course, there's a couple of different ways I can do it. I can click here and go back. And we see that. And we see, and we still have this open. Let's go ahead and close that. There's our new folder that we've created. So if I want to get something out of the shared for me and I want to put it into a folder or put it over here, how can we do that? What's an easy way to do that? Because it's sometimes hard to be able to see all those things at the same time. Well, Google figured it out, and here's one of the things that you can do. Shared with me. All right, so here we are, we're back there. We're gonna go down to the one with the rocking horse. I'll find it real quick. It's called Formatting and Editing, and it was shared with me by Allison. And I wanna put it in my drive, but specifically, I wanna put it in a particular place. Well, we know that if I click on Drive, or if I click on Drive right here, this entire desktop, if you will, changes. It's not going to say share with me anymore. It's going to be Drive. But we have an option here. We have these little expand, contract buttons, and this is pretty cool. So all of the folders in alphanumeric order in this case are right here available to us. We can see they look like holders. And if we get down here, we see we get to the Z's, and there's the particular one that we just created for this class. And if I click on that button there, if I click on this, it's going to take us to that folder. This changes. I'm trying not to do that. I'm going to click on this right here. And if you remember, I had those the Microsoft and Adobe things that were in there, the files that we had, and then we ended up making copies with the Google version. This expand collapse is just showing us the folder tree. It's called the drive file tree, but it's the folders that are in there. And so we know that in that one that we created earlier, we have the Adobe one and we have the Microsoft. All right, so we can expand and collapse that as we want. With this one in particular here, let's say that for fun, I'm going to take this particular one here and I want to take it out of shared with me, except for you can't anymore. I just want to make it accessible for whatever reason. So be thinking about, I think it was Katrina that asked the question, be thinking about your department, somebody shares something with you and you want to keep that in a specific folder so that you can get to it quickly. So you don't have to keep coming back to share with me and scroll up and down and find all this stuff. And again, you can, you might have a shared with me folder that's up there or whatever, but if you want to put it in your drive, in your folder and have control of it, again, you used to be able to take this actual document in this case and put it in there, but they now keep everything in the shared with me so you can find it again in the shared with me, but they allow you to put a copy, if you will, a shortcut in something else. So what I'm going to do at this point is I can either right click and I can say, add a shortcut to drive. And if I do that, then I have to decide where it's going to go and all that, but there's a much easier way to do it. And since we're a little short on time, I'm just going to do it the fast way instead of showing you both. Let's click away from that. Okay, so I want to get this one and I want to take it out of shared with me, or at least make this shared with me file available in my folder. So all I got to do is left click, drag it, and just drop it right there. And you'll notice this is still here. And so now, if I go to Drive, let's just go back there, get out of the shared with me, and I go to my folder and I drill down on it, and now I'm inside there. You'll see that I have, okay, that one's letting me in there. Okay, this is where we're going to get really in the weeds. This is what I was looking at before. Because some of the files that I have were around before they changed the rules, those files can still be moved around into your drive because this is not a shortcut, because it's already been done. And I apologize that I forgot that I'd seen that earlier, but let's go back to the shared with me. And Let's go back down to where we were. And if I right click on this, you'll see that the move to and, show file location and all that, those are all still available by right clicking on it. Well, let's see if this other one is. So this one I can't, because this happened after that rule change. So again, here's an example of Google changing something, and they're trying to give us more features, and they're trying to make it easier for us. But now there's these little nuances that are involved. And so I can add a shortcut to Drive, but I can't actually move this to Drive. I just said that that's what was happening before on this other one right here. But because this was something that had already been moved to Drive a couple years ago, since you saw the dates on it, 2017, 2018, I could do that. So let's make sure that I'm telling the truth now. Let's go back to here. And again, we're in the shared with me. I want to keep this on the desktop so I can see it. I want to go to my Drive. I'm going to scroll down all the way to this one here. So now I'm going to take this one. Again, if I right click on this, it's not allowing me to move it. It does allow me to make a shortcut, but I'm going to do it the fast way and drag it to here. And I can already see beneath here, you can see the little icon. So it's already showing me it's just going to do a shortcut. So I put it in there. It's still here. It hasn't disappeared. I go back to Drive. And then I go and I open up my one for today, our temporary one. And now you see that it's a shortcut because it has that little arrow icon. Let me get a drink real quick. If you're fairly new to Google Drive right now, this is going to be very confusing to you, and I apologize. I'm trying to make it as simple and straightforward as possible. If you've been around in Google Drive for a while, just know that if you had taken something out of your shared folder and put it into your Drive somewhere, into another folder, when they changed the rules on this, those things that had previously disappeared out of your shared with me went back to your shared with me, and you can still move them to other folders. But anything after that date, you cannot move them out of shared with me. You can only make a shortcut. And here's an example of that. And how do you know which ones are which? Well, the easiest way is when you're in the shared with me. And again, I go back down to where, come on. I go back down to where that, that horse was. Right clicking on it. If it says you can move it, it's not grayed out, then that's one that, that predates that new feature. But the other ones, like this one was moved around because that one was clearly older. Let's find some other ones. This one is not. It was never actually put into Drive. It was just something that was shared with me. In fact, if you look at, you'll see all of these things. This was all shared by one department because I was helping them in a department training. And so I never actually took them out of my shared with me section or folder. And so because of that, when the new rules showed up, it's not going to allow me to do that. And just for fun, I am going to move this one or make a shortcut. Let's see how it works this way real quick. It's going to say, well, where in my Drive do you want to go? And then I have to navigate and tell it where. And then of course I go down to the Z's and there it is. I can click on that one. That's the one, and add the shortcut. It says it's doing it. Of course, I can go back to my Drive, go to this particular folder. Come on. And we're going to see, there it is. And we can see that it's just a shortcut. So I apologize that I walked you through that a little bit backwards. I had forgotten that this was one I'd already moved. And anyway, so there's that nuance. But the way that it works now, and let's just start it that way. The way that it works now, anything that someone shares with you, and whether it's a folder with other folders and files in it or whatever, no matter how big, or it's a file of any kind, it doesn't have to be Google. When those people share those with you, it's always going to be here in your shared with me section. You could find it there. Okay. If you have a lot like I do, you'll be scrolling for hours because they're all there. If at any point you want to organize some stuff, and you want to take one of these files and put it somewhere in your Drive in another file, because like our example of your craft room, your utility room, or your garage where you want to store all your different things, you want to label stuff in Tubby so that you can keep track of it. You want to take stuff out of the shared. If it's something that hasn't been moved into your drive before that that new rule change, then all you're doing is basically putting a little shortcut icon, which actually, having been around for a while, they should have done this to begin with that way, but they figured it out. Someone, and by the way, just so you know, in these Google forums support sites, you can go on there and there's people talking back and forth, sharing ideas. There's Google engineers that are dialoguing back and forth with us, Joe Public, Joe and Jill Public, and getting new ideas. And by the way, if you're so inclined, you get so good at, in this case, Google Drive, and you're there in those forums and you're helping people and you're answering their questions and all that, you can move up in status. And at some point, you could actually get a job at Google as one of the engineers, actually being the professionals that answer those questions. But what's my point? My point is these products are getting better because people are sharing ideas back and forth. And so someone said, oh my gosh, it is so confusing that stuff is disappearing out of shared with me, which is why Katrina, I'm guessing, is saying, hey, we need to talk about this, that they changed it. So now that's the way that it works, that it's going to, they have part of it grandfathered in, I guess. And then the new part where it's just putting the little icon in there, the little shortcut, we're going to call it, that'll take you to that particular file. And just to be clear, it's the same with all these other ones. If I want to move one of these, I can drag it and drop it into something else. I'm not going to do that because I don't have a pretend one of these. I should have shared one with myself earlier, so I had one that I could then add to our fake one, but I don't want to move these around because they have other things in it that I don't want to lose, and just for the sake of relocating, but it would work the same way. So at this point, there's more that we can talk about with the shared, but that's kind of the crux of it. Katrina or anyone else, fire away. What else would you like to know about the shared that I haven't covered yet?
So Thad, when you have those two shortcuts, the horse documents in your folder, just to kind of reiterate Becky's question, if that owner, if Allison, the owner, makes changes to that, and it will automatically show up, those changes will show up in those shortcuts that you just created. Is that correct?
Great question. Okay, so here's what I did earlier today, trying to answer that very thing. So in my alphanumeric order here, which I love, and I recommend everybody at least start off with that, so you can find things, I created something new, and I did it not in my sandy.net thing, but I actually went and did it in my personal Google Drive and created something. You can see it's right here. And why did I do that? I did that so I can share it with my sandy.net self, and so then I can experiment and see how things work. So here's a caveat to that for those of you that are trying to solve the riddle that is Drive that's always changing. Because we have a sandy.net administrator and they make certain rules about sharing and all of that other stuff that we're going to do. Now we're going to talk about in a little bit how we share stuff with people. Sandy.net does not play nicely with things outside the organization. So sometimes things work and sometimes they don't. And so just keep that in the back of your mind when you're trying to practice stuff. But here we are in my personal account, and I made this document here, which I believe is already opened, and it says today's APE test document. All right, and then I went up here and I shared it, and we really haven't talked about sharing yet, but I guess this is a good time as ever. So I go up here to share, and when you click on share, all I got to do is type in the names of people. So for example, let's do Becky. Let's see if that shows up. So nope, that didn't show up. So let's try it the other way. Usually it's the last name first. So it was
Paradise.
Paradise, thank you. Cool last name. So that's not showing up either. Come on. So it's a SE, correct?
Yes.
Okay. That's not showing up either. That should be popping up and giving me ideas or whatever. For some reason, I'm in a bubble. Things aren't quite working quite right. Well, let's do it this way. What is your email address, your sandy.net email address?
K.
All right.
MCC.
You said K?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
MCC.
MCC.
LA,
LA,
NA.
NA.
Oh, get the Y out of there.
Oh, this is Katrina. Okay, I'm sorry. I thought it was doing Becky. Sorry. So you get the Y out of there.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and what's next after the A?
NA, HAN
HAN.
at Sandy.net.
Oh, okay. So then it is, let me get my glasses back on so I can see where the @ symbol is. Oh, there it is. Okay. All right, so there you are, it popped up. And I realize the reason it's not popping up is because I'm in my personal one. If I was in the sandy.net one, it's connected to your contacts, and so it's gonna be a lot easier. And that was a really long one, but we did it. All right, so at this point, if we're trying to share with someone, once we get their name up there, okay, so here's another little banner. It says, add sharing restrictions. Control who can share, download, copy, and print this file. All right, cool, we know that. So at this point, I'm just going to click over here. So we already saw that this particular one was shared with my sandy.net me. We're now adding a second person. And so because we're still in that mode, what is it we're going to allow Katrina to do? Do we want Katrina to be an editor? So they have the same rights as an owner as far as making changes and doing all these different things, or just to view it so they can see what it is I'm doing on this particular document, or can they see it and then make comments? We're going to leave Katrina an editor just for fun. And then if I want to, I can have a little message here, and depending on how you get, whether Google notifications or whatever in the email or however, a little message can pop up. And so here's the name of the document and all that, but I'm going to go to the settings thing here, and let's take a look at the options. So just know this, editors can change permissions and share. So if this were a folder that I was sharing with you, and I allowed you to be like, to control, either the document or the folder, it all kind of works the same. If I don't want you to be able to change permissions for other people, then I can deselect that. And that's how I can control what happens with documents and with folders and all that. But look at this one right here. Viewers and commenters, that's not the editors. Editors can do everything. But if I deselect that, oh, I'm sorry. I already made you an editor, so let's just leave it at that. If I made you just a viewer, I could make it so that you could see it, but you can't even make a copy of it. You can't even print it. You cannot download that. So if you're interested, just a heads up, if you're doing something in your department, you don't want other people stealing your work, or it's something that's sensitive, you don't want them to be able to make a copy of it because it's got maybe student data or something like that on it, and people are viewing it, right here is where you can keep them from making a copy, printing it, or downloading it. The caveat to that is, if you're like me and you write handbooks and job aids and stuff like that, I have editing tools and software where I can go take a screenshot on even like a very specific part of the screen. I can copy that information. So the personal data could get out that way. But as far as them in any of the Google apps, taking that personal information to make it a copy or whatever, if I deselect this, and if Katrina was just a viewer, then Katrina would not be allowed to do any of those things. So just a heads up on how that works. And how do we get to that? We just did the editing. Okay, so we're going to make you an editor just so you have rights to do all that stuff. And we're going to say send. And so however you get your notifications, and again, we showed how to do that in settings, you're going to get those notifications. So it says right up here, a person's added. And so that should show up if you have your sandy.net drive open, Katrina. At some point, you're gonna see this pop up in the shared with me as you refresh your page. And so what I would say, Katrina, is don't change the top part here, but go ahead and put the cursor down here somewhere and then add other things. Why? Because this is going to show up as part of the picture, the thumbnail, the little picture we see. And so that we can recognize it, you can make some changes down here. Does that sound fair? And so once you do get to that and you do open it, just for those that are very new to all this, you will see a different color cursor. And if I hover over it, and up here, you'll see Katrina's name actually working with it. But again, remember, I'm in the not sandy.net, so things are going to work a little bit differently. I'm going to go back now. Oh, there you are. So it's still working. Thank you for going down below there. So we're in my personal one, and there we can see Katrina's little icon or whatever. that she's working on that. So I'm going to go back now to the sandy.net one, and we can start talking about the different shared with me things. So the question was, if changes are made inside of this, is it going to show up in my temporary folder that I made, my ZZZ folder that I did? So Katrina, hopefully you're down there, you're typing and adding some stuff that you can do. And again, this is why I didn't want you to change the top part, just so we can see that and it's easier for me to find. But I'm going to go back to Drive, because remember, we made a copy of this, if you will, a shortcut in that folder. So let's go to our temporary ZZZ folder. I'm going to double click on it. I'm going to double click on it, and I open it up, and where the heck is it? Did I not share that with us? I thought I did. Maybe I didn't. Okay, I think I was about to do that, and I went down a rabbit hole. I apologize. It'll take me 1 second to get back there and do that. So I'm going to scroll up. Here it is. There's a couple ways I can do it. I can right click on it, and I can say, add shortcut to Drive. Let's just do it that way. Or I could have opened this little Drive file tree up here, and then I could have just dragged and dropped it there. But it's just as easy to do it this way. And I scroll down to that ZZZ one at the bottom. Probably should have done a ... so it would have been at the top. It would save me a little bit of time. Boom. Now it's been added to it, and there it is. So now I can go back to Drive, and I can go in here and double click on it, and it should show up. And I don't see it. Come on, refresh the page. And again, remember, you're dealing with a server farm that could be hundreds of miles away, and at near the speed of light, this data packets are going back and forth. And so this is one of those little anomalies where it's not showing up. You're like, what the heck? I just saved it there, and I know I saved it there. So maybe I'll just go back and I'll try and do it again. Double click, see if it'll show up there yet. Hasn't showed up yet. I believe I did it right. So it should be here. Let's just keep refreshing this. It should show up. And by the way, if we go to recent, it's not even showing up in there. That unnerves me a little bit. So there's a couple things that I can do to try and force the reset. The reset's not happening at this point. So let's just go back to Drive. So kind of what's happening, I call them like bubbles, data bubbles, where things are just sort of spinning and not happening. We've seen that, many times. Any of us working on computers, you see those little, I call them the blue wheels of death or whatever. They're just spinning around in circles. Something's going on where it's not processing, but at some point it should kick through and show up. And maybe it had to do with this part here. I'm going to go down. Let's try it a different way. Let's go to here and scroll down. There it is. Oh, so look, we can already see Katrina's making some changes. So that's just on this little tile right here. Now that that's showed up, before I try and send it over there again, let's just go see if we can find it. Maybe it's showed up by now. Of course not. So let's go back to shared with me, and let's try it a different way. So I'm going to take this and I'm going to drag it to the ZZZ APE class and drop it in there. Look, it says shortcut added to it. That's what it said last time. So now we should, I'm actually curious if we're going to end up with 2. I didn't say to undo that. So we just hit the refresh right there. Then we switch to the Drive. Come on now, Google, you're making me look silly. Wait, there it is. It finally showed up. Okay. Did that have something to do with the fact that I dragged and dropped it this way? Maybe. Maybe just that direct way of doing it is less confusing to Google. I don't know. Is it supposed to work the other way where you just say, where'd it go? It's not there now because it's already been, I guess that answers my other question. It's not allowing you to make a second one because you already did. Oh, shortcut options. You can move the shortcut to somewhere else, but it's already in that ZZZ folder. So now again, when you right click, you see that things sort of change just depending on what it is.
So that with that particular document, and it is a shortcut, I see that we have the option to quote remove. But sometimes when we are shared other documents or files or folders, and it says add a shortcut, we say yes, and then it says you will not be able to remove this from the folder, and it stays there forever. Like you cannot remove it. So what's the difference between that and then that particular one that you just did where we have the option to move, or excuse me, remove?
Okay, so here's where we get into nuance. And so my first question would be that folder that you're trying to remove it to, do you have what's called editor rights or the ability, like ownership rights or whatever, to be able to move things out of there?
No.
Then it would have to be the person that has permission for that.
Okay.
And so that's the quick answer, but it's very convoluted. And to kind of answer that, I'm going to go back to my drive here real quick. And let's see the best way to do this. Okay, so I'm just going to drill down a couple things. I'm in my drive. This is where we started out today. I'm going to go into my Google Classes folder, and I'm going to double click on that. And in that folder, I have several more folders. All right, a couple of them are shared. This one is Master Google Class Files. So I'm going to double click on that. And so inside that folder, so you can see inside the My Drive is the Google Classes folder. Inside that is another folder, and that one is shared. Okay. Whatever the permissions are for sharing that are set up with this for whoever is sharing with whomever. And by the way, we can do this to find out. So here's my master Google Class file, and I'm in the info thing and on the details. So my personal Google account, Google Drive, is the owner and the one that sets all the rules. And my sandy.net version is the one that's being shared with. So this particular folder and everything inside of it is set up by the rules. So let's see if down here it actually says what the rules are. And I can't see everything down to the bottom because of my Zoom windows, but let's look at activities, see if it shows us anything different. So it shows my sandy.net self. I moved something on February 25th, but then my personal one did some other things or whatever into this master Google file. And I can go back and I can see somewhere where it might say that permissions were given to my sandy.net self to be able to do X, Y, and Z or whatever. That's not the best example because I'm gonna have to search through a whole bunch to try and find it. But the way it's supposed to work is that, like in the case of this folder here, and everything inside of it, including all of this, whatever permissions are given to this folder, everything, the permissions cascade downward. So everything else should be also the same permissions. So if I gave permission to my sandy.net self to be able to add and remove things, and shortcuts kind of and again, that's like shortcuts just came about a while back or whatever, and so there might be special rules to that. But as far as like adding stuff to that folder, if you have permission to add a folder or a file to that folder, then you should have permissions to be able to remove it as well. That's been my experience in the past. But with the new rules for the shortcut, it might be different, that it will allow you to put a shortcut in there. Oh, I just think I figured it out. Why? Because when you're looking at it on your computer, that's the only thing you're going to see is what you put in there. Or you can put a shortcut in there for your own convenience, but no one else is going to see that shortcut in that folder that it's shared with. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think so.
So in other words, the owner of it says that you can't edit anything, you can't add or remove stuff from a folder or any of the files that are in there. But when you're looking at it on your end and you're shared with me or wherever else, and you add a shortcut in there to get to something, like in one of your folders, you add a shortcut to a shared folder, then those rules still apply, but you're the only one seeing that shortcut.
Okay.
But we can try that in the real world. I'm talking in the abstract, and that is the absolute worst way to do this. So let's go back to here. Let's go to somewhere we're familiar with. So let's go back to our, oh, there we go. So actually what I was going to do is just click on it. I was going to just tap it. There we go. So by just selecting it, now we're taking a look at the details. So we can see that this was created by me. This is my sandy.net me we're talking about for this class or whatever. And then we look at the activity. Check this out. Everything we've done today, including this little shortcut, it's all being loaded in here, right? And so we go all the way back to when it was created and when I added the PDF, when I added the Microsoft Word file, and all of those different things that happened when I made the Microsoft folder, it's all there. That's pretty remarkable that you can do all that. So here's what I'm going to do. Now we're going to go in here and let's see the best way to do this. So what I'm going to do at this point, I think we can do it just straight up. Let me go back to where I was. So right here on the folder level, I'm going to, because I selected it, I can either go up here and share, or I can right click on this, and we're about to give Katrina permissions to do this. So I'm going to go to share, and now it's going to load it up. And so what's the first couple letters of your email address, Katrina?
KMCC.
KMCC. Did I get it right?
Yep, that's third one down.
Third one down, thank you. Okay, so there you are. And so again, if I'm going to make you editor, I have all these different options. Editor means organize, add, and edit files. All right, organize means the folder in and out and all that stuff. And then there's one more parameter that editors can change permissions and share. I can deselect that there. So there's the caveat. I still have some control over what you can do as an editor. So just remember that. And if you're not sure what those permissions are, just go check, do a pretend share and look at the options or whatever. But I'm going to leave you editor. I'm going to leave those settings so you can do all of those different things. And I'm going to say send. And so if you're on your drive right now, Katrina, go up and either hit this or hit this button up here to like reset it, just to kind of refresh the page. All right. And I'm still down here on this one. I selected it. And so the activity, it shows. Now you remember that I shared this, made you editor, had control of what goes in and out. You can see right down here is you have that information on this. This is my activity and everything that was inside there, including, well, in this case, it's the folder, but there should be, why aren't the other folders in there? Oh, okay, here's what's interesting. It's showing the contents of the other folders. Remember, I had a Microsoft folder and I had an Adobe folder. And so it's showing you the contents of all of them. But basically, all of those permissions that I gave you for that. Now, if we go in here, you'll notice that there's a share icon for both of these. That's you. That's who it's shared with. And all of these should be shared as well with you. So if you go to yours and you go to the shared with me, and this is where it gets convoluted for all those people that are watching, when you do this, you should see, you know, some recents or whatever, some folders or whatever. Yeah, the folder should show up in your folders. So depending on how many folders you have, I've only got like 9 of them here. So I don't know how many folders you have. You should see on yours, it should show up somewhere and you should be able to access and be able to change some stuff in there.
And
all right.
Can
Do you
add
see the folder?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. And
so
that was fine without.
I would like you to throw out the Adobe folder, which means you're going to throw out the Adobe file that's in the Adobe folder. Go ahead and throw it out. I allowed you to do that, and let's see what happens. I'm going to go back to my drive, and again, hopefully we won't have any bubbles here. All right.
You'll throw out the Adobe folder.
Yeah, just the folder, and we'll
just remove.
Just remove.
Okay.
Let's see what happens.
All right, I did that.
So all of you that are watching right now, you're looking at my screen. The Adobe's gone. And I'm curious, this should be as part of the activity. It should show up here because you have the ability to do that. So let me hit the refresh a couple times. And so this is what's weird. It disappeared from right here. So clearly it worked, but it hasn't showed up here yet. So why is that? I don't know. It just hasn't gravitated over there. So if I hit refresh a few times, chances are, oh, now I gotta go down and, oh, there it is. Aha. So Katrina restricted access to an item. So that's just a fancy way of saying that you got rid of that stuff. you made it go
Okay.
away. And so I don't have access to it anymore.
Okay.
Interesting.
Alrighty.
But if I didn't want to allow you to do that, when I shared it with you, I could have made you an editor so you could add stuff, but I could have checked in that settings box that you can't remove stuff and whatever. So does that kind of help answer your question?
Clears it up immensely, definitely.
I apologize for those that this is like way in the weeds, but see, these are those things, Katrina, that you have to practice. And I can tell you the truth, I can share with myself all day long from my Yahoo version of it, and it's going to act differently once I get into the permissions and all that with the sandy.net, because they get very specific on that.
Yeah. Well, thank you. This has been really great.
You're welcome. Any other questions about that particular thing?
No. I think our staff really appreciates it because, you know, I think sometimes we just fumble through it without knowing the whys. So I think from beginning to end, it's been excellent in knowing all that information. So thank you, Thad. We appreciate it.
So Katrina, I want to try one more thing real quick, and this involves you. If you'll just give me a second, and apologize if you have to run somewhere, but I'm going to look at my trash. I haven't thrown anything in there. You just threw something in your trash. Would you go to your trash real quick? And you're going to find that whole folder, the Adobe folder with its contents sitting there. And while Katrina is doing that, just for those of us that are sitting here looking at stuff, I'm just going to grab this right here. I'm going to right click on it, remove it, throw it in the trash. Yep, move to trash. So what I'm asking Katrina to do is to restore it. And how do you restore stuff? You go to the trash, you find something there, you right click on it. I can delete it forever and I can't retrieve it. And that does mean forever, or leave it there for 30 days and it will disappear forever. Or I can restore it. So I'm going to restore it back. And now I no longer have items in the trash. And if I go back to my drive and I scroll down, I should be able to find that same one. I think it was this one right here. So Katrina, would you go to your trash and then restore the Adobe folder? And I want to see if it's going to show up in my folder as well, because it had permissions attached to it before.
So the weird thing is that it's not in my trash.
Ha!
I know,
Okay.
and I just did a refresh, which is so weird.
Okay. So here's where we get into nuance again and rabbit holes and all that. That may be the way that they designed it, but that doesn't make sense. If you have editing permissions, like ownership permissions, just like I did, because I gave you all those,
Yeah,
and throw it away, you should have the same ability to restore stuff.
right.
I'm thinking it's in a bubble of info right now, and it just hasn't showed up where it needs to. So keep refreshing it and see if that shows up. And if it doesn't show up in the next 20, 30 seconds, then we'll move on to something else, and then we'll just check it before you leave. Hopefully you can be around for a little bit longer. But that's where we are trying to discover what the flipping rules are for Google, because that's the whole problem with Google. They keep adding more stuff and making all these features, but then there's these like legacy issues that you have to sort through and figure out what you're allowed to do. But as far as sharing permissions, whether it's just to edit a document, or in the case of Katrina, being able to actually remove stuff from a folder, or remove, a folder inside of a folder in this case, just know that permissions flow downward. So because I gave Katrina permission for this particular folder, everything inside of it's fair game for Katrina, because that's what I did. All of the permissions cascade down there. That's at least been consistent over the last several years. So hopefully they won't change that anytime soon.
Yeah, it's not coming up.
Okay. Well, that's really interesting. I am glad that it showed up in the activities finally, but it's interesting how it disappears right here in front of my face. And then we have to hit this a bunch of times for this to show up. Not sure exactly why that is, but that's what happens. That's Google. So a couple more things I just want to get to, and I realize we've gone way long, and maybe we should have done this over 2 days, but for those that are going to come back and watch this, it'll be available. Or anybody hanging on, well, we can still do that too. Wait a minute, participants too. Do you realize it's just you and I, Katrina? We've lost everybody.
Yeah.
Oops. Okay. Well, that's what I get for trying to be super thorough. So I think what I'm going to do at this point, and if you need to go somewhere, we can even say goodbye to you. But what I just want to do is point out a few more little details, like the search, for example, which is really cool. And that's probably it. I'm trying to think of what else I wanted to share. So I'll just share this with you and anyone else watching this. In the search is pretty slick. because it's gotten very detailed over the last while. So if I want to search in Office apps, I can do it there. Instructional technology, that's a group that I work with. Classified professional developments, that's another one. So it's giving me it's throwing up some ideas of where I can search. But it also saying, hey, you want to search in all of your Google sites that you created? I've only created 2, but maybe there's some other websites in there. Documents, and by the way, that's both Word and Google Docs. If I want to search in folders, PDFs, all this kind of stuff. Or I can do an advanced search, which is the same thing as clicking this button up here, just so you know. So I'm going to click that button there. Let's take a look at it. So if I'm trying to find something somewhere, what is it I'm trying to find? Is it a document, a Word, or a Google Doc, or is it an Excel spreadsheet or a sheet spreadsheet? What is it? So I have the choice to start choosing all these just for fun. I'll pick documents because we've got lots of those. Owner, anyone, guess what? So now I can say a specific person. And since I was using one of our previous people from our classes, I'm just going to type in Allison. Let's see, I think it's a Y that comes next. There it is. So I can do that, and then date last modified. Is it today, yesterday? When was it? I could do that. I can narrow the search, in other words, by doing that. And also, it might have certain words in it. If I happen to know what those are, I can kind of drill down or narrow the search things or whatever. But at this point, I think there's at least one of those, so I can search for it. And there it is. It's the one we were dealing with earlier today. The one that I was trying to make a shortcut and put it in my pretend file, but because of the fact that I'd already put it into my drive, then we had that issue. But anyway, that's the one. So you can search for things that way, and you can change it up in countless ways. Or I can go up here and just go back and then get back to where I was. And so I can search for all the PDFs and just click on that, and there they all are, and I can just kind of scroll through them and figure out which one I was looking for. Oh, there's that cheat sheet for Excel I was looking for, and I can find it that way. Or you can search for it, in very specifically with all the different information that you can give it. So that's been kicked up a lot in the last year or so, and it's gotten so much better. So that's wonderful. We pretty much talked about the rest of these. Starred, we didn't really talk about that. I'll just mention that here's some that I put in a Starred. Well, what is Starred? It's kind of like your favorites, kind of like up here where I have the office skills training page, and if I'm on another page and I want to put it in my favorites, I click that little button there. So going back to Drive, just for fun, we make the this temporary one today. I'm going to right click on it, and it says add to Starred. Well, that's pretty simple. And so then I go to the Starred one, and now that's where all my favorites reside, and so I can find that particular one that's right there. And again, if I want to find out if it's in the Start section, it's not in my drive. It's actually in both places. It just means this is a favorite, so it's just a smaller group, if you will, of what's in your drive. And then I can go to the activity, and I can find out about all the different things that we've done to that today, or look at the details to find out who owns it. In this case, it's me, and who I shared it with, and it even shows the permissions there, so that's pretty slick. So that's the Starred thing. We already talked about recent and shared with me. I think that's about it. There's one other things that we could do, since we were talking about shared with me before, and when I was experimenting with this earlier, I was noticing that different ones. So when I right clicked on this, I had a different menu on this one than I did when I right clicked on the next one. I wasn't able to move it around. Why? And that was simply because this one, before the new rule change a couple of years ago, that had already been put into my drive, and this one had not. So now when I want to go add one of these, it's going to end up as a shortcut as opposed to the file showing up there. But again, I can click on any of these and find out information as to who owns it. And this is someone from the district that made it available to the whole district. And I guess that's the other thing that I haven't done so far. And I should go back and look at Drive. Actually, let's just go to Start. I'll go a little bit faster. And so I'm going to go to Share on this folder. And so we already shared it with Katrina. I could add more names up there, all that I want to. And each person gets their own, designation as far as what their permissions are. But then I can do this part down here where it says get link, share with San Diego Unified. So there's the link. I can copy it. I can send it out in an email and everybody will have access to this, like a whole department or something like that. Or I can set it up to anyone with the link, not just San Diego Unified, but anyone with the link. And I can do that and send that maybe on a web page. And so parents that aren't part of San Diego Unified, but have students, they can then click on that link and get access to that folder and whatever information's out there. So be thinking about your department and how you interact with people as to which one would be the best. And of course, you can always go back to restricted. What is restricted? There is no link permission available. It just happens to be the people that you've shared just with this. That's pretty much how the share things work. Just remember that you can do more finite determinations as far as what those privileges are by going into the settings and clicking on that. So that's pretty much it. And I apologize that this went so long. I was trying to be so careful, trying to explain everything in such detail at the beginning that we had a good foundation understanding for it. So well, I'm sure we'll talk about this some more, and we'll probably visit this all again in our open lab, or even have another class where we can kind of rehash out. There might be more questions about the shared with me and all that. But at this point, we're going to call this very long class over, and thank you everybody for your patience for being a part of this. And I'm going to go ahead and end the recording. And if you're still with us and you want to ask more questions, you certainly can, but we'll do that outside the recording. And we'll go ahead and end that. Thank you so much for being with us today.